Let this be a reminder to you all that this organization will not tolerate failure.
The side of the federal building has been blown off, Jesse.
They believe they were part of a CIA project called MK Ultra.
Just like a segment of society that is not living in reality.
In a certain sense, we're kind of a little bit more Israel's vassal state.
There are police chiefs facilitating prostitution networks.
Do you understand? It's all in your head. It's your move.
What up, what up? Welcome, everybody, to the Underclass Podcast with myself, Austin Picard. And I am joined tonight by Radix Verum, a.k.a. Christina, which I have to say, I cannot thank you enough for honestly just giving me your time, first of all. But then I have to tell you, I've admired you personally and your work from afar for far longer than we actually even, like, I would say far longer than I was given the privilege of meeting you when you came on Already Dead. So it means a lot to me that you would obviously come on the show. So I have to start out by saying that, and then obviously give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. But first, I have to say that she's the director and producer, right, of Kidnap and Kill,
yes,
an FBI terror plot, which I think is once again doing the Lord's work, right? Anytime you're attempting to sort of smear egg in the face of the state, right, I will attempt to spotlight that and very much appreciate and value that. And also, I just have to say that this is what I love most of all from as far as having a podcast. The reason I started it was to sort of have these opportunities, you know, to have these sort of, I think, far more constructive conversations, but it's in a way where, again, I think there's no real concern of insulting each other, being offended about, right, certain ideas. Just, I feel like there's something so valuable about objectively pursuing the truth and being willing to have these conversations that are very much open-minded and considering the alternative theories. Because once again, it's like we have to remind ourselves, right, how often the official narrative is definitely an attempted misdirection as far as public perception. And it could also provide us with a legitimate window into the sophisticated sort of clandestine operations and how they're conducted in real time in modern day as well, right? And so, Christina, welcome to the Underclass. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I too have been listening to you longer than I think the first time we did a show together. So awesome. It's pretty cool. But yeah, thank you for plugging the documentary. I wouldn't have remembered to do that myself. I'm terrible about stuff like that. Right. But yeah, you know, trying to get that done, that has been very difficult. You know, there's a lot, it seems, that goes on behind the scenes to try to prevent that from coming out.
Yes.
And, you know, it touches on Pat Kahn, in addition to the Whitmer story. So I think that's part of the reason why.
Definitely. I think it's so valuable, especially just in terms of the current political milieu and how they very much, I think, coexist to pursue a dystopian agenda that I believe, you know, the sort of two-party paradigm is more of a two-party delusion and an attempt to kind of manufacture consent in every way in terms of political ideology. And so I just feel like any chance you get, obviously, to highlight the fact of that we have serious political corruption at every level of government, but then to actually witness that there is this sort of prioritized agenda of targeting these, in my mind, individuals who sort of fit a profile and become they're obviously vulnerable targets in terms of, I believe, clandestine operatives and operators within this sort of covert network that are attempting to recruit assets, or at the very least strategically lure them into place, which I think happens so very often, where it's like not even a conscious thing that plays out in terms of the actual victims of these operations, being deceived deliberately. And anyway, I think,
and just the amount of resources that they will throw at this. I mean, Barry, one of the guys framed as a ringleader in the Whitmer hoax, he had so many OCEs, online covert employees. These are FBI undercovers who operate false personas online that were around him. He sent me a list of like 50 people who he believed he interacted with, whether they were FBI informants or online OCEs, covert employees, or undercover actual FBI agents. It's outrageous that they can do that they can kind of surround a target with different assets. Some are in person, like, they meet up in person. Some they talk to online, but you have this whole group of people that are like influencing, manipulating, pressuring somebody. And that went on for almost a year, to get Barry, just to kind of maneuver him into situations that they could make look bad, which is disgusting. And it's interesting, they argue that they had predisposition. They were predisposed to talk about a kidnapping. Okay. If there was predisposition, why then did you need to use 50 informants and undercover agents to spend a year manipulating these people and luring them to events? And, it's outrageous. It's so stupid on so many levels.
Right. It truly is. And then you consider the source, right? Just Gretchen Whitmer. Just, my God, you couldn't be more of a perfect representation of everything that is wrong with the state, right? Like, honestly. And again, it goes to show this false framework of what is meant to, of course, seduce the public opinion in terms of the false representations of the sort of like inverted moral, just ethical principles that they are clearly attempting to present as the alternative in this current environment. And I think that is obviously a strategic trap that has, in my mind, it's social engineering at its best. Obviously, you're conditioning the public to sort of embrace this dystopian path at every level as well. And that is where, you can perfectly identify, at least if you've equipped yourself with this sort of pattern recognition, your ability to critically think through things and just catch the red flags as they come and remain skeptical. And obviously another thing is no longer a worship at the feet of the political puppets, right? Which are clearly just kind of running. Again, they're running these strategies of misdirection for PR purposes only, in terms of the political cabal in place, the permanent establishment, I like to refer to it as, right, that insulated from accountability, at every level as well. And this, to me, the story of James Holmes, right, is just, my God, like at every turn, it's just the most, I would just say, you have to, at a certain point, ask the undeniable and unavoidable question. It becomes inevitable. And that question truly does become, to what level was James Holmes kind of exposed to these methods of behavioral modification? But I don't want to get too out in front of obviously the case itself. I'm not sure exactly where you want to start, but I do know that I always kind of like, I harken back to Michael Aquino's Mind War and the Psychology of Victory, especially in terms of what feels to me like the modern Gladio playbook, just re-implemented and resurfacing throughout these scandalous events that take place. And specifically, the psychological manipulation of it, utilizing these emotional arousing, like emotion arousing violence, and these deliberate false flags to obviously create a pretext, right, or manufacture consent to some extent for landmark legislation, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, the way that I described it in my episode on Omar Mateen was the unethical aims of our ruling class have been extensively documented, right? And it's like we just need to remind ourselves by looking at these examples, right, at this deeper level, understanding the I mean, extraordinary details in these cases that obviously I think paint far more of a plausible alternative theory to why this happened, the motivations behind the event itself. We'll never get a black and white, clear-cut answer in terms of some of these events, but I do believe that it's not at all what we're intended to believe to be the case, right? And what's been presented by the mainstream media. But where do you want to start, honestly?
So I just want to say that I believe you're right. I think when you look at stories like this, James Holmes being a perfect example, you can see how each of these events, they serve as a strategy of tension overall within the nation. I think another aspect to it is the event themselves serve as a trigger, like Columbine, perfect example of that, the Columbine effect, where they almost made it like mimetic in a sense, if that makes sense. Like, it's so weird. And while I was researching James Holmes, but also just some of these other mass shootings, I end up finding this connection between Columbine, Virginia Tech, 9/11, and looking into Sung-Hee Cho, who I'm working on a video on him. I see many parallels with him and James Holmes. So it's to me like they are profiling people, I think, from an early age. I mean, James Holmes was incredibly smart, as you know, very, very bright, top 1% of his class. He had top scores, Phi Beta Kappa, Regent Scholar, Salk Institute intern when he was 18 years old. So he would have been on their radar. And it's like you look at the family history and you see kind of like, oh, okay, so they're looking for a certain kind of person that maybe has a certain genetic component of like susceptibility to certain things, like, hypnosis, things like that. So I find that to be interesting. And then you also always find these connections to the intelligence community, to defense contractors, and the like military bases, military installations around, crawling with Columbine, all over Columbine are those connections. I mean, Eric Harris's father, right? Oh, and then not to mention John Benet Ramsey, right? Her father, John Ramsey, also worked for Lockheed Martin. And you're going, oh my God, so is there a connection between like CSA and defense contractors and these military bases? Right. Very disturbing things. And Adam Lanza's father, Peter Lanza, James Holmes' father, Robert Holmes, connections there. It's so weird that this stuff always comes up. Sung-Hee Cho, his sister, working for the State Department, for McNeil Technologies, doing Iraq reconstruction. There is always these weird connections, and we're all supposed to just believe, I guess, that this is a coincidence. The coincidence theorists, right, would have you believe.
Exactly. I think that it's so crazy you mentioned John Benet Ramsey, because there's a connection to her murder and investigation in terms of her father, and the connection to the police chief in Boulder at the time, essentially being sent down to, he was, first of all, he was I believe previously second in command in Houston, right? And this is under the former Atlanta Public Safety Commissioner Lee Paul Brown, right, who would legitimately be the individual responsible for helping facilitate the cover up of the Atlanta child murders in the Wayne Williams case. And so I believe that Wayne Williams was also a very much sort of like a manufactured plausible patsy. I believe he played a role within the network, was recruiting children essentially through, I think he was recruiting children through what I believe was called the Gemini Project, which was allegedly this talent spotting recruitment project that he was running on behalf of the overall enterprise of sort of providing children for child pornography to the local studio that was ran by Michael Thevis, who was the well-known child pornography kingpin at the time in Atlanta, and had direct connections back to the Odyssey Foundation and John David Norman, who he legitimately, you know what's crazy? John Wayne Gacy was effectively connected directly into the Odyssey Foundation, which was this pedophile network, right? Which connects to the Dean Corll murders in Houston. What's fascinating, because John Wayne Gacy, essentially an individual by the name of Phil Paskey, was working on his construction crew, and he was actually the representative running the Odyssey network during John David Norman's incarceration, which is so fascinating. Wow. And they just renamed it. They renamed it to the Delta Project. And so it goes to show, like, of course, there's a connection to the individuals who were involved with the JonBenet Ramsey case, directly being involved in helping facilitate the additional cover-ups of what I view as it. I don't view there's a real distinction between these networks. Honestly, it looks like this a state-sponsored child trafficking operation. That's not only, obviously, the enterprise is far much. I think the scope of it is far, just in terms of what they're attempting to achieve with the enterprise itself. It's not stopping at that, which I mentioned so very often in terms of child pornography and the abduction of the children. But anyway, the fact that you brought that up just blew my mind. And again, it's like, for him to have been set up as a suspect of opportunity by the CIA in terms of Wayne Williams, it just fits perfectly with really kind of, in my mind, what effectively took place in terms of the consequential nature of the Aurora case in terms of James Holmes himself. Yeah. And I do have to tell you this part, because I wanted to share this with you and then let you go off and running with the which direction you want to take us. But this is fascinating in terms of who should be viewed as a credible individual that very obviously is attempting to provide us with an avenue to understanding potentially what is being effectively managed and implemented on the ground level in terms of many of these domestic operations in real time, the strategy of tension you mentioned right earlier. And that is through this Dr. Robert Duncan, the Harvard professor who wrote this book, right, called the Project Soul Catcher, Cyber and Cybernetics Warfare Revealed. And it's absolutely crazy what he claims. And I mentioned this, I believe it was toward the beginning of the episode that I covered it in my Program to Kill episode, which is basically what I called the James Holmes case, was Program to Kill, because I just, obviously in every way it fits the profile, but yeah, so he says this in 2012 that Dr. Robert Duncan, Harvard graduate, investigator, and author of this book, claims that over the past 10 years, he had personally interviewed more than 650 people who claimed to have been under government mind control. He says they all claimed they were in a Manchurian Candidate ID program free. He went to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he alleges that he met with 26 senators as well as the head of the LA FBI and worked with a consortium of scientists on a research project. And it, like, for over 8 years, it was up to 10 years he was working on this. And then he provided an estimate to the public in terms of what he claimed to be the case as far as the Manchurian Candidate program. He says there are around 10,000 Manchurians in the works being programmed by the CIA right now that can be used at any time around the world. But he concluded by explaining that only a small percentage actually become successful Manchurians, which instantly reminded me of, you remember that case? I think it was in Colorado as well, but I'm not certain. It was an amusement park case. And basically, this guy had broken into an amusement park, had then gone into a female, I think the women's restroom, It was after hours, and he wrote on the mirror. Basically, it was something to the effect of that he essentially had to suicide himself, or he would go through with it,
Yeah.
basically. And my God, in terms of this case specifically, and the details that come up later on, as far as some of the claims he had made, allegedly, James Holmes, does that not fit so perfect? And
Yeah.
and the only point I wanted to make, and then I'll shut my mouth and I'll let you actually take us through some of the more extraordinary details. But it's just in terms of this Robert Duncan, because again, it's a fascinating source as well. But for him to have claimed this, I mean, it's extraordinary, and it feels too accurate in my mind.
Yeah.
But he then seems
It's interesting. You said he mentioned cybernetics, right?
yes.
That is very interesting when you look at Holmes' mentors.
Exactly.
So
The
I'm very
neuroscience.
interested in that.
Exactly. I'm going to send you this source and the book as well, honestly, because I think you'll really appreciate it. It's crazy. Some of it's very difficult to read because it's like it feels very high level in terms of the just the technological understanding. You almost have to be just a higher level within the field itself at certain points of the descriptive terms to kind of understand it, and until you go seek out the definition and attempt to make sense of it, it's still difficult. But it is, I think, a very important resource for anyone who's attempting to understand some of the modern sophisticated techniques of behavior modification, right? And so anyway, the last point here was just that the fact that obviously not all of them would become successful Manchurians, but what the motivation behind the reason why they have this program, according to Robert Duncan, is of course to subvert international laws forbidding the CIA or any of the intelligence agencies to engage in the assassination of foreign leaders, through the strategy of indirection, or utilizing agency handlers to indoctrinate individuals into these Manchurian candidate programs in order to self-righteously assert plausible deniability after the fact.
Yep.
Now, Robert Duncan claims that a lot of these alleged mass shooters. Now, this is crazy because instantly I was thinking that whenever I've been basically discussing at a very deep level, unfortunately, just this sort of enterprise that involves snuff films at a very sadistic and sinister. I mean, obviously, it's just the nature of what a snuff film is, but it led me to effectively, I mentioned John Wayne Gacy and that strange connection earlier, to effectively question the concept of a serial killer just in general, and then also how they just, in the same sort of strategic undermining manufactured misconception sort of playbook of the satanic panic, they attempted to do the very same thing with that of snuff films, claiming they're this sort of urban myth, right?
Yeah.
And man, that's just so crazy to see people like Alan Dershowitz out there since the early 70s. He's running defense for screening snuff films. I mean that's just
Literally a demon.
yeah, the ethical, I mean implications of that is just, it's
Sick.
stunning. But the final point of Dr. Robert Duncan is that he says that he believes James Holmes falls into this Manchurian candidate category as well, and he suggests that essentially this was predominantly motivated by the attempt to manufacture consent for landmark gun legislation, largely encouraging Americans to disarm themselves. It falls perfectly in place with that of the Vegas shooting and the bump stocks as well, in a certain way, and the security provisions in the casinos. And he says through a combination of drugs, manipulative psychological techniques, and advanced cybernetics, they have achieved many of the goals of the CIA's top secret program in human behavioral modification. He then claims that the modern technology does not require brain implants, and he even says that they work very well, but they seem to rely much more on post-hypnotic suggestion. One of their goals was to create split personality spies so they could pass information without even knowing it, and even commit murder with no memory of the crime so they could still pass a polygraph. Among these techniques used throughout the process is something called, we all should be aware of by now, the voice of God technology, obviously. And even while these subjects are asleep, they're kept in dissociative states and can allegedly be programmed with subliminals. And these targets are often manipulated through the use of microwave hearing effects or voice transformation, such as using the voice of a dead relative to implant ideas in the subject's mind. He then says, this is the final statement, neuroscience has become the modern battleground where war wages on over the control of the human mind. Cybernetic warfare. The 21st century will be known as the age of spiritual machines and soulless men. And that just like
Oh my
resonated
god.
with me at a level. It was just like, it felt far too accurate to pass up and not acknowledge and somehow find a way to cover it, you know, at a certain point. But I had to at least share that with you because I found it just fascinating to tie that into James Holmes,
Yes.
right?
Yes, yeah. That is so much, you know, everything that was mentioned there. I have like little anecdotes in my notes for on Holmes, like the dissociative states, the multiple personalities where Holmes talked about possessed James, and that's, you know, the one that wore the black eyes and dyed his hair red. And remember how the media framed this as like the Batman shootings, and like they said that he called himself the Joker. It never happened, but that was the theme. And it was like right when Christopher Nolan's film came out. But more interesting is another Christopher Nolan film, Inception,
Right.
with James Holmes specifically, because that is very similar to the things that he was researching, the weird science that he was getting into. And I just find that to be interesting. And one other part of that too was like the Dark Knight Rises. There is a part of that where they show a map and it literally says Sandy Hook.
That's crazy. Are you serious? I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. No way.
Yes.
My God.
It's so weird. And
Isn't that the funniest thing too, right? That alleged motive the mainstream media tried to concoct and sort of perfectly place around James, where that's the reason that he dyed his hair, because he wanted to be like the Joker, even though the
who
Joker
had
has
green hair?
hair. Yeah, like what are we talking about?
Right. He just like paint on a smile. Or
Yeah. We're supposed to believe this is another example of the plight of the socially awkward, alienated anon incel, right? Essentially. But yeah, that's just obviously not the case, you know?
It is insane. And so I guess just to give you guys some background, I'm sure everybody knows what we're talking about. The Aurora shooting, that was in July of 2012. So just a few months before Sandy Hook. And 12 people died, 58 injured. Holmes, when he was arrested, he was described by police as appearing meek and non-threatening, which is interesting. And the official story that the police came up with was that they found him, his car was parked right outside the back entry of the theater, right by the little side door there. And that he was just standing there, you know, with the helmet on, the gas mask, and all of the gear he had on, which was a tactical vest. He had a throat guard. He had leg and shin guards. So, I mean, they say that they mistook him initially for a SWAT member, and he was just standing at the car with the door open. And this is bizarre for a number of reasons, because listening in on the police scanner, they very clearly are talking about him being in his car. They say suspect in the white car, inside the car. And when you look at the crime scene photos and some of the video that came out initially, the passenger side window is busted in. So somebody busted that in. And then underneath the car is a a medical, like a stretcher, just under the car. No explanation given for that. There are actually 4 gas masks that are recovered, 4 of them.
Christina,
What's
that
that
sounds
about?
like a conspiracy now. Be careful.
And
It's so
then
funny. That is, go ahead. Go ahead.
it's just weird. Like outside the door, there is, one of the rifles, and then there's this trail of blood that goes past the car into like the parking lot area, and it stops like right where the other gas mask is discarded, and then there's 2 others at different areas, and it's like, well, what is this trail of blood from? It wasn't from him. And why does it kind of end like where this other stuff was found? And not just a gas mask, I should add, there's like black clothing. When you look at the pictures, that are these parts that are like not explained. The response time of the police was very fast, almost like they were already there, waiting to just show up, right? Like, and yeah, so he, I believe he was in his car when they found him, and he was very cooperative. He immediately told them he was the person. He acted alone because they were asking about, are there other people? And he then volunteers to tell law enforcement that he has booby trapped and rigged his apartment.
Right.
So
look at this. This is reinforcing what you're saying. He looked at me and smiled, says the officer who approached him, and believed that he was SWAT, which is crazy, right? It's fascinating. Of course, this is how they would attempt to frame it. But for him to actually, my first thought was, how did that SWAT guy get there so quick?
Right, exactly.
Right.
And Grizzle, he did that, by the way, when he smiled, because Grizzle asked him, were you alone? Did you have accomplices? He said that Holmes just looked at him and did a smirk.
Right.
So that's weird. And then there's so many other aspects to this.
Right. What it reminded me of was the Mark David Chapman sitting there reading Catcher in the Rye after he allegedly shot John Lennon, right? Just waiting to be apprehended by the authorities.
It is that level of insanity. And they also claim that Holmes had the assault rifle on him when he was standing up by the car. So what about the one that was discarded by the door? It doesn't get explained. And there's so many other aspects to this. So I think it's probably a good idea to get into a little bit of his background.
Definitely.
Holmes, and I have my notes here because I want to make sure I'm totally accurate here, and there's a lot of information. So if I'm going into too much like granular detail, just let me know.
Don't you dare apologize for that. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, I spoke about this stuff. I went through like hundreds of pages of like his medical documents, and the things I found in there never were reported in the mainstream, never discussed. And it's funny because when you try to like search on YouTube for any videos about Holmes, what comes up is actually the trial itself, which was televised. So you're getting all of these because of how YouTube prioritizes mainstream media sources. Like you cannot find any other like schizo people doing these deep dives. And typically what you find are like true crime channels that don't question the official story at all. And they think that they're like armchair detectives, which is funny. And so going through it myself, it was the first time I had heard some of this stuff. So just to give you guys some more background on Holmes, he was a PhD student at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. And it used to be Fitzsimmons. Fitzsimmons was part of the Army base. So this was like an Army place before it was made the Anschutz Medical Campus. The Anschutz family donated like $91 million to get the name. He was given a grant, $21,600 grant by the National Institute of Health, the NIH.
Wow. Oh my God. That is so freaking funny, honestly. Like, just considering the just post COVID, obviously.
Oh my
Just
God, right
yeah,
after
right.
Fauci and like the
Mhm.
insanity. You couldn't make it
100%.
up if you wanted to.
Nope.
And
Yeah,
I apologize if people saw my Holmes video and this is maybe a little bit redundant, but you're getting my commentary now, out of the script I put together, which I think is valuable. Because when I'm doing
absolutely.
these scripted video, I mean 40 pages is a lot, and I'm just trying to cover all of the information. And I haven't been like streaming lately. So you guys are getting my commentary on it. So
Nice.
to get into his background, his family. Actually, there's a couple other things I want to add here.
Mhm.
So he attended Westview High School. He graduated in 2006. And he claims when he was a child, he was scared by these things he would see that he called nail ghosts, and they would hammer on the walls at night. And he also apparently tried to self-delete when he was just 11 years old. And so his parents took him to therapists then. So he has a
Oh
history of like
my god.
childhood psychology, psychiatry, and that
He fits the
that pattern
profile.
continues throughout his life 100%. That if
Yeah,
he wasn't on the radar before then, that is when he went on the radar.
right.
He also in high school he played soccer, he ran cross country, and he did the internship at the Salk Institute, which is a very prestigious institute, and there's a lot of very weird spooky people
It's
connected
advanced.
to intelligence and all
It
kinds of weird, shady things.
it's so crazy how much, honestly, like the way that it feels like it just fits the playbook of the CIA's careful and systematic assault on the human psyche, right? Like, is that not what they've been attempting to achieve for so very long, to place these assets into position to achieve exactly what we had mentioned before, which is just again, the precedent setting operation, but also the level of the ability of the intelligence apparatus and what they've sophisticated as far as the techniques themselves, how advanced they truly are. I mean, honestly, talk about the elimination of self-determination. Talk about legitimately shattering the very concept of free will itself. I mean, honestly, that's what happens if you lose. And there's a quote by I think it was Lynn Hersha or something to that effect. I believe is her name. I'll mention it later because honestly, her and her sisters, they wrote this book about how they were basically programmed through this post-hypnotic suggestion, but behavioral modification and these advanced sophisticated methods of neuro-linguistic programming and how they lost the ability to possess free will. And essentially, unbeknownst to them, there was a trigger coded language word, trigger word or response that would essentially activate them, and they would lose all ability, right, to essentially exercise their own free will as an individual. And like that alone, it's just
it's interesting because Holmes' mentors were researching quantum physics, and one of them talked about how there wasn't free will because at the quantum level, that before you consciously choose to do something or think to do it, your body's already like sending the signals to do it. The argument was that free will doesn't exist.
Right.
You just think that you had free will or that you came up with this idea, but it was already happening before you consciously were aware, which is really disturbing when you think about like how they're programming people, that this is the mindset that they have. It's very disturbing.
Right.
So Holmes, in 2010, he completes his bachelor's degree. This was at UC Riverside. And he gets his bachelor's degree in neuroscience, and he has highest honors. He was Phi Beta Kappa, Golden Key, Honor Society, Regent Scholar. Like, this is top. He graduated top 1% of his class with a 3.949 GPA. So we're
Right.
talking about like a very intelligent person. And I think about like the GATE program, right? The Gifted Kids program that took these kids and we're trying to use them for like remote viewing, which also has a little connection to James Holmes. It's so weird. He was 98th percentile on one of his tests, the graduate record examination, 98th percentile on verbal, 94th on quantitative, and 45th on analytical writing. So he was like, yeah.
Advanced. Yeah. They even claim that there was a character eval that claimed he was a leader in his class as well.
Yes. And then it's totally different from how they would describe him later. So his mentors, specifically John Jacobson, tried to distance himself from Holmes after, this event occurred. He would try to say, oh, he didn't really know how to do things. He was egotistical and like he downplayed his relationship. He tried to act like he didn't really mentor him. That's not true at all. And I will get to Jacobson, but just to continue here. So this is like, he did that, by the way, part of his bachelor's degree, like I believe while he was in high school, like he was already doing some college classes. And then of course he did the Camp Max Strauss, the Jewish Big Brothers, Big Sisters, where he was a leader
Christina,
and mentoring young
how
kids.
dare you? Oh my God.
So that's another interesting aspect to this. And then in 2011, he pursues his graduate degree in neuroscience at the Colorado PhD program, Anschutz Medical Campus. And he moved into these student apartments. This is on Paris Street. Keep in mind, his apartment was number 10 because we're going to talk about that apartment complex later. But it was for health students, basically. We're all kind of living in this area off campus, though. Right. In graduate school, Holmes claimed this is when he gets to the University of Colorado, this is where he starts to see shadows and flickers in the corners of his eyes. And they would fight with each other with firearms and other weapons. He would see saws chopping off people's heads and like limbs and these weird, disturbing visuals. That right there flickers at the corners of his eyes. When you go back to a video that came out from the science camp at the Salk Institute in 2006, it's Holmes giving a presentation. He's talking about his internship at Salk. He specifically mentions John Jacobson as his mentor, and he talks about the different things he's been doing. Studying temporal order, reversal, it's time illusions. Yeah. This weird, and then flicker fusion, which is, he's literally talking about like psychic driving, and he's talking about mind control applications where you're going into Flash and you're programming basically. It could be in a movie, in a video game. It's like subliminally moving, these little intervals of like flashing different screens to get the effect of the order of the film being reversed. So basically they get it to where B would precede A. That's what somebody would perceive by clicking this thing and then changing the rate of it incrementally. You can create basically like an illusion to make somebody think that the order something happened wasn't true. And also flicker fusion is used for subliminal messaging as well, where certain frames like, when you're looking at like a movie or like old school television, there's different pictures and they're all flashing to make a continuous moving image, but they're different images. So every 45th image, you can insert a different frame. You will not consciously see it, but subconsciously you will.
Right.
So this is the kind of thing that like he had been working on, and then he reports that he starts seeing the flickers in the corners of his eyes and all this other weird stuff. So,
and it was just before he allegedly committed the attack at
Yes.
Cinema 16 that he allegedly dropped out of the PhD neuroscience program there at Anschutz, right? And
Yes.
it was in like June, and then it was the next month.
The next month.
Yeah, yeah, very next month. That's crazy to me that was sort of the order of things. But yeah, what did he give? He gave you said that presentation. It was so crazy because I remember covering it in my episode. It was about the biological basis of psychiatric and neurological disorders. Like you just admit that's just. Are you kidding me?
So,
He's legitimately talking about mind control. I mean, that's effectively he's talking about the a sort of modern version of how you could accomplish this. In many ways.
Weird. Yes, exactly. He's saying, you can use this in video games and movies. And he talked about how that was his mentor's idea, which is like, okay. And then subjective experience, also very weird. These are very weird esoteric subjects. And I can talk a little bit about the mentors here in a minute, but just to stay on the timeline here. So he started dating a girl. I forget her name. I think it's Jita, or it's an Indian name.
Right.
Forgive me. I can't remember it. But, this was, I think, kind of like his first girlfriend. So they broke up. They got back together. She broke up with him again. And it's obviously one of those situations, if you read the messages between them, where he was like way more into her than she was into him.
That's what it seemed like. But I was wondering if that was a convenient way to distance yourself from the individual who allegedly committed such a heinous crime.
It's interesting that you say that.
I don't know,
because if you read their text messages, and you read his psychiatric report, he talked about experiencing, after having a conversation with her, a call to action to do something.
Oh no!
Because he was talking
She's
about
the woman with in the polka dot dress with Sirhan. So what you're going?
It's kind of weird.
Right.
Their conversations are bizarre too. Just reading them is very strange, but like. Yeah, they're talking about him wanting to kill people, and she didn't really try to dissuade him. It's very bizarre.
Right.
So he basically, in January of 2012, they break up the second time, and then he goes, I think it was in May. It may have been a little slightly earlier than that, but he goes to the student health clinic. And he's seen by several psychologists. Dr. Fenton, I think, is the main one who was most likely the person who, was programming him and put him on certain drugs that obviously were having a negative effect on him. And it's really sad because if you read the notebook that he allegedly sent to Dr. Fenton. Yeah, I say allegedly because, how convenient. Sure. Just like Cho Sung-hee were to believe the Virginia Tech shooter killed 2 people in a dorm room, then went back, put together a multimedia manifesto with an 1,800-word actual manifesto, a bunch of pictures and videos, and then took it to the post office, sent it to NBC News, then came back and killed another 29 people and himself. And the whole time, like, nothing happened between the first killings, which were earlier in the day, and then the second ones. Like, they didn't evacuate the campus. They didn't say, hey, we have a situation here. It's a little weird. So it's like that, like, oh yeah, right before he did this, he just made sure that he went to mail this out specifically so that she wouldn't get it until a day or 2 after. And they claim it was sitting in the mail room for like a week and they hadn't found it. And another part of this, they said that there was burned money in there. Like, he burned dollar bills and like put that in with the notebook, which is also weird because it's like they're trying to foreshadow the Joker, right? Yeah, and absolutely. Then in the notebook, he says the message is there is no message, another line from the film that hadn't come out yet. Very weird, right?
honestly. And you consider really Nolan's past with sort of induced amnesia films like Memento as well. Not only is there the Inception sort of factor in terms of the strange implications of the obvious, like what to me Memento is just like, it's induced amnesia, but it's also through trauma, right? Which is, it's like you go along and experience that very same path that the character is on as an audience member, and it feels as if you're almost a victim, right? Where your mind is fracturing and you're trying to just desperately attempt to make sense of the timeline and how things are playing out. And isn't that what happened to Tamerlane Tsarnaev leading up to the Boston Marathon bombing? He claims to his family, and obviously, I mean, there are far more connections there with his uncle Ruslan Tsarnaev and Graham Fuller, right, the architect of Al Qaeda, and them living together for a time while he marries Graham Fuller's daughter. And Tamerlane lives with him before he comes to the U.S. for a time. And when he comes to the U.S., well, honestly, leading up to that, the reason that it reminded me of this is because he claimed to his family, specifically his mother, that his mind felt like it was fracturing into two, that he couldn't make sense of these losses in time. And he would just wake up in areas that he didn't understand how he got there. And just like that alone, man, fits that same profile, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's so disturbing.
Isn't it?
My goodness. Yeah. And I just want to add that one of the FBI agents who was the lead handling agent on the Whitmer case worked the Boston Marathon bombing case. So interesting connection there. Yeah. Jason Chambers.
Oh my God. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So he was a part of Operation Urban Shield then, probably, huh? That's what I think the marathon bombing was. But anyway, it's another example.
Yeah, it's so weird, like how all of these things end up being connected in some way. When you get down to the very fine details. So he he failed a oral exam in June of 2012. Then supposedly he dropped out of school. I also want to add that his James Holmes family has a odd history. His grandfather had severe OCD. His mother's father had to be institutionalized a number of times. His Aunt Betty is schizophrenic. So, they're sort of like, this is exactly the kind of person that they look for.
Right.
He's super bright, top 1% of his class, honors society, and also has this weird family history of,
They said his grandpa also, I believe he graduated from the Turkish Language Institute in 1948.
Yes. Yeah. The grandfather, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Holmes, he served in Okinawa during World War II, and he was the last commander of the Nike missile group in San Francisco. He was one of the first Turkish language students at the Army Language School, which is now the Defense Language Institute. And then
is that located in Monterey, California? Is that the same? Okay. Now, you realize that's where they claim that Lee Harvey Oswald attended in order to learn how to speak Russian so fluently before his fake defector program at Atsugi Air Force Base. Yeah. What is happening?
This is insane.
The path of the patsy, Christina. My God.
Exactly. And then he ends up teaching at the York School after his military retirement, the grandfather. And he also, like, Holmes's family goes back to the Mayflower, his lineage, and his grandmother, she went to Stanford. So there's that connection. She worked at the Monterey City Library, Ford Ord Library, and Pacific Grove High School. And then she also ended up teaching at the York School along with the grandfather. And she was a member of several societies, including the Order of the Crown of Charlemagne, Descendants of the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company of Boston, and the Monterey Bay Colony of Mayflower Descendants, where she was the governor.
No way.
You couldn't make
Oh
it up
my
if you
God.
wanted to. So his father, we briefly mentioned Adam Lanza earlier and his father, Peter, just to make another connection between Lanza and Holmes, was that they both referred to therapists as mind arists,
Right.
which is like, okay, they're saying what happened to them. Like, they're saying that
100%.
for a reason. Peter Lanza and Robert Holmes were connected to the LIBOR scandal. So they were both supposed to testify back before these events happened. And so it's very strange connections there.
Absolutely, especially just considering the implication of being involved with the international finance rate being rigged.
Yeah.
It's just-
That was a
I mean, that
major scandal.
absolutely. And then you're set to testify. Both of you are set to testify around this same exact time. And then your children are greenlit in a mass shooter Manchurian candidate program, effectively
Just a
before you're
few
set to
months
testify.
apart between each other too, and not that
Crazy.
far distance wise. It's really weird, guys. And
Telling you,
the
man.
dad is interesting. So Dr. Robert Holmes, James Holmes' father, is also a PhD. He works at FICO, and he created a specific algorithm to detect fraud. So, very interesting. But prior to working at FICO, he actually worked for a company called HNC, which FICO later acquired in 2002. HNC specialized in neural networks and AI research. And we're talking about, this is like over 25 years ago. So we think about how AI, like, obviously is a big thing now, but back then it was a little bit more esoteric. So I find that fascinating. And the founder of HNC is a gentleman named Robert Hecht Nielsen. He claims to have discovered the mechanism of thought, and he asserts that he can replicate it in computers. He was saying that in the early 2000s, which is crazy. He is supposedly an authority on neural networks. Hecht Nielsen introduced the first comprehensive theory on the mammalian cerebral cortex and thalamus in 2002. His research revolved around scientific testing, elaboration, and extension of that theory. He's an expert on brain theory, associative memory, neural networks, and perception theory. His theory of thalum cortex is currently being promulgated and integrated into research worldwide. Also, HNC has worked with DARPA in the military. They work with the military to develop smart cameras built on neural network technology that can notice if something strange is going on and sound the alarm.
Oh my God.
You cannot make this stuff up if you wanted to. So this is like the history. That's who Holmes's father was working for, Hecht Nielsen at HNC, before it was acquired by FICO. It's very bizarre. HNC also was developing technology for the military-industrial complex, artificial intelligence systems. It's basically like transhumanism. Nielsen was developing enhanced biology, AI neural networks to, quote, advance human beings to a post-human age.
My God. That's another level to the totalitarian technocracy. If we're legitimately becoming one, right, with the what did Robert Duncan claim? Soulless men, right?
Yes.
I mean, that makes sense. But yeah, it's a very, I would say, it makes me very uncomfortable because it's clearly being pursued at every level in terms of the agenda. And you witness this sort of technocratic state forming around us in this very current environment.
Oh my God, right? Palantir. Yeah.
My God. And the Transhumanist Manifesto and how much they sort of like, it's a religion, you know, honestly.
We're seeing these stories now too about people having relationships with chatbots and like killing
Man.
themselves because a chatbot literally
see
told
that?
them to do it and like
Chat
encouraged
GPT
it.
psychosis. That's what they called
Yeah.
it. It's a phenomena. Your
It
online
is
girlfriend
weird.
is causing you to commit self-harm. That's so funny to me.
And
But
now we have Elon Musk putting out these digital avatar
oh my
chatbots,
God,
Ani and Valentine, that are
strange.
like my pornographic. I don't know how else.
Seriously, I saw one of my buddies mentioned I think it must have been, I forget who it was who tweeted it, but basically claimed that it was some sort of sex ritual that Elon Musk was trying to get men to essentially
Right.
masturbate to this AI chatbot. And
Yeah.
yeah. But
He's
that's
posting
not
videos of it dancing around in its underwear.
right. It's not that far off from reality, honestly, as far as if you ever go down the path of like the sort of way that the screen itself was created in order to kind of in this manipulative way disrupt your neural pathways through the frequencies emitted from the screen itself. The color blue effectively matters apparently, and I wasn't quite can't remember the details as to why, but I forget who the essentially one of the architects like basically blew the whistle and had a sort of intelligence contract and obligation as far as like when he created a lot of this and a sort of like manufactured some of the technological applications that were then embraced and implemented by that very agenda, right? And then he saw how it was sort of playing out and felt an ethical kind of like just he felt sort of like he needed to rise to the occasion morally in order to address what he had sort of at least in his mind, he had played a significant role in helping roll out this sort of new age technological control. And it's fascinating how much I think there's reality to that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The phone's always tracking you. It's always listening to you. It's recording everything you say. You could talk about something and then you'll open up your phone and you'll get a pop-up ad for what you were just talking about. And
Right.
it's also made people so dependent on the device itself. I mean, most people can't even navigate their hometown without a GPS device on their phones. Like they don't even know how to get to places on their own. They don't know how to read a map anymore. Maps don't even really exist. Like it is very interesting, that agenda. And I think that Uncle Ted was right about technological society in many ways. Also a victim of MK Ultra. Another very bright intelligent student that was experimented on, and you can't make it up. I mean, another parallel with Holmes, right?
Absolutely.
So I find that disturbing.
Oh, 100%. I remember when I covered Bluebeam. There's this insane. He talks about telepathic hypnosis and in the obviously in his manifesto, but he talks about artificial thought and communication, right? And essentially claiming that these are advanced techniques to propel us toward these dystopian steps of telepathic, electronical, as far as electronic augmented communication, utilizing these ELF, VLF, LF waves, right? And essentially, they will be armed with the ability, as far as the tools necessary, to essentially manifest an original thought in your mind and have you on a frequency believe that this was effectively an original thought. Yeah. And that, I mean, be careful, everybody, because honestly, like, we're talking about legitimate claims of local police departments being equipped with some of this technology where they can legitimately pull up outside of your house and target you with these very effective techniques and even supplant subliminal instructions and things of that nature, right in the mind of their subject, which this is all effectively proven, and you just have to go through the documents yourself to essentially be convinced, because the mainstream media certainly won't do that for you. So I mean, that's where we find ourselves, right?
Yeah, it's weird too, because I think about Philip K. Dick and what he talked about in Valis and the weird experiences he had where he was having these hypnagogic visions at night where he trying to sleep and he would see these weird things. He was seeing ancient Rome overlaid on LA. And
Oh
like
my
it's just
God.
crazy when you read about, yeah, it's bizarre. He has a bizarre story too of like a multiple personality where this being like he, as he describes it, like took over him and wrote some of his books and
Oh my
also
God.
diagnosed his son with a very rare disorder just in time for the son to get surgery and have his life saved. It also like it went and got
Crazy.
back payment for work he'd done that he didn't get paid for and like put his business affairs in order. It's such a bizarre story, but he talks about like, you know, this experience where he'd had dental work done and this woman from the pharmacy was coming to deliver his medication and she had this necklace on with a Christian symbol and he said a beam came out of it and hit him on the head and he remembered that he had a past life back in ancient Rome. And this is when he started talking about the Black Iron Prison and he thought that he was like a secret Christian during times of persecution. It's a very
Oh my God.
read his exegesis. I think you guys would find it fascinating. But Valis is very interesting because it stands for Vast Active Living Intelligence System, where he's almost talking about this like AI entity. And like he wrote that book a long time ago, like well before AI was like a well-known thing. And many of his other stories have been adapted into films with also very similar themes.
It doesn't surprise
Blade
me at all.
Runner, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. My
Yeah.
God. That's so disturbing. Honestly, I think that the strange glowing background of James Holmes' family is just like that alone kind of like stands tall behind this entire event, you know, in my mind, because I don't think you can sort of distinguish between that the impact of the familial dynamic in terms of their footprint in intelligence. Like his own mother was a psychiatric nurse as well, wasn't she? I
Yep.
believe. Which
Yeah,
that
isn't
to
that
me,
interesting?
come on now, that sounds like you know, wasn't that the same case with Thomas Crooks? I believe. Wasn't that the same case in
Yeah,
terms
I
of
think
his
so.
parents?
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous, honestly. But
It is wild.
yeah, we're intended to believe they acted alone, the sole perpetrators, right? And in every way, it's just it honestly becomes laughable at face value. But yeah, that Robert Heck Nielsen connection there. I mean, what was
Right?
he even studying? It was like as far as like the neural network company that DARPA was sort of like during the contractual obligation with HNC, they were allegedly like developing those Courtronic neural networks, like you mentioned, as far as this strange, you know, behavioral modification, but also utilizing this state of the art technology and
Yeah.
AI as well, right? Which is
Yep.
just
Smart cameras that
crazy.
can detect things before they happen. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
which sounds a lot like Minority Report pre-crime policing in more ways than one, which what does Larry Ellison claim is
Oh
going to be
God.
sort of the next obvious I
That
would imagine
scumbag.
stage in much of the mass surveillance state being implemented in real time as well, using dystopian biometrics, in biometric surveillance and things of that nature. I mean,
Yep.
every single, I mean, layer of society itself, especially in a city, you are being effectively, you know, surveilled and recorded at all times. I mean, honestly,
Everywhere.
yeah.
Oh yeah. And then look at things like Sam Altman's WorldCoin iris scanning
My God.
technology, if you want to call it that.
Mhm.
It's creepy. You know, why does he want to scan everybody's eyeballs and he's giving them crypto to do it? And imagine the person who is, you know, who's willing to give up their iris to scan their iris to get a world coin and calling it
God.
world coin. I mean, it's just so like world government, you know?
Yes.
So weird. So Holmes'
Conditioning.
mentors, I do want to talk about them briefly while we're covering this weird stuff, because I think that it's interesting. So I mentioned John Jacobson earlier. This was the gentleman that Holmes specifically mentioned during that presentation. Jacobson has discussed altering perception and how easy it is to do this. He says, quote, "It's possible for us to manipulate temporal order. We have loads of power over temporal order. If events happen in the order of A, B, a good psychophysicist can have the subject experience it as B, A. This is routine." This is routine. Okay.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
Psychotic. And so it's very hard to find information about Jacobson online, which I think is this is often the case with a lot of these, events where you kind of try to research these people, and so many things have been scrubbed from the internet. But I was able to find an article that John Derbyshire wrote about a conference he attended in April 2008. So this would have been 2 years after Holmes was in the Salk Institute with Jacobson. This was an event that was put on. It was like a several-day conference with different speakers, and Jacobson was one of the speakers. It was called Towards a Science of Consciousness. And he talks about this event, and he's saying that, some of the things that were being discussed was like, your intention to do something precedes the conscious decision to do it. They had a presentation called Sex and Consciousness with a panel discussion of the varieties of sexual experiences.
Oh my God.
They did a joint lecture on panpsychism, which is very bizarre. It is the notion that consciousness is just the outcropping of a concentration of a psi field that pervades everything. And they say that electrons and neurons possess teensy little specks of consciousness according to panpsychism. And that they believe, basically that consciousness exists everywhere. It's not really individual, and it's just like the psi field being engaged. And they ask the questions of how do mental events arise out of matter. Now, Jacobson presented himself, this is Holmes' mentor from the Salk Institute, as a philosopher and information scientist. That's how he described himself. He put on a presentation where he talked about an unbeatable program that he'd created of rock, paper, scissors, that it couldn't be beat. And he was talking about folk volition, another odd thing, and pessimistic indeterminism, where he was trying to explain free will.
Oh my God.
And how it doesn't exist.
Stop it right now. Oh my God. This is too accurate for what they would need to accomplish everything we've laid out already here in I would think extraordinary detail, as far as in terms of the lack of free will being obviously afforded to the individual priority targets of many of these programs, and how they would kind of fall into this very clear path that has been laid in terms of the operational standpoint of the actual methods, and right, just in terms of again, the techniques being sort of in my mind very much exercised, as far as these. It feels like there is just clearly, as Dr. Robert Duncan claimed, some sort of covert clandestine pool that they can draw upon at any moment, where you have these individuals kind of like psychologically almost just it feels like what's the word, they're primed and ready in a way to where it's damn it, there's a term that is escaping me at this moment, but it feels like it just more than anything, it just feels like the environment itself is just too perfect for some sort of modern mentoring candidate program to have been effectively pursued. And especially if you're considering attempting to just, again, you're considering the idea of the general public, right, becoming willing to embrace dystopian, landmark legislation, as we mentioned before. This is how you would effectively achieve such an outcome, right? And I think that it's impossible to deny these details once you've actually just taken the journey and just probed a little bit below the surface in terms of this case specifically. Yeah, it just, there's no way you could come out the other end, objectively speaking, with some sort of agreement in terms of the mainstream narrative and how it allegedly took place. But
yeah, when you read this stuff, like you cannot ignore it. Once you hear it, you're like, you couldn't make it up if you wanted to. It's that insane and that bizarre. So they had another guy who, at the same event that Jacobson was a presenter at, listen to this. This is what he talked about. Physicist Daniel Sheehan, he put on a presentation where he talked about experimental results. And he said this, that you show your suspect a blank screen, then you randomly display a picture, either an emotional one that will evoke a strong neuro response, i.e. a naked woman, perhaps, or a calm one of like a seascape or a forest. And then you quickly go back to the blank screen and monitor neural reactions. The emotional pictures show a strong reaction after they are shown, but they show a measurably stronger reaction before they're being shown it. So he's saying that they are reacting to the image before they've even seen it.
Wow.
Think about that. It's weird.
Yeah.
So he's calling it retrocausation.
Oh my God, man.
These are the people that were around James Holmes. It is bizarre. What else do I have on the Salk Institute? So I do think this is important. Salk has been described as an isolated compound, not unlike monasteries for religious discoverers, a temple of science where man pursues knowledge of our biological foundations.
Huh. Yeah, that to me feels almost esoteric in itself.
It
this
is
sort of, like
this is occultism.
Yeah, it almost feels like almost it's kind of the nature of the Temple of Set and the Black Flame and this higher intellect and becoming your own god, and this sort of replacement theory of how you would implement that new age ideological system of control in terms of replacing the god hole, and the soul trap that's very much being effectively laid. And this plays perfectly into that, honestly, to me.
Yeah, it is bizarre. So it is obvious to that Jacobson himself, he sees himself as an occultist. That is not just us saying that. That's how he perceives himself. He co-authored, this is Jacobson, the mentor, in 2004. So 2 years before he would mentor Holmes, he co-authored a paper with David Eagleman at the Salk Institute on temporal illusion. It was called Perceived Luminance Depends on Temporal Context. And Eagleman is interesting for a number of reasons. He operated the Lab for Perception and Action in Houston, Texas. The Eagleman Lab was funded by the National Institute of Health and DARPA, just like James Holmes.
My God.
And this was in its quest to produce super soldiers, a super soldier program.
Of course it is.
It should also be noted that Eagleman is Israeli military intelligence. He earned a PhD in neuroscience at Baylor University, and he was studied under Francis Crick, who co-discovered the DNA molecule.
Oh my God.
It gets this weird, and this is like the thing that doesn't really get a lot of coverage with Holmes is his mentors, which was Jacobson, Eagleman, and a guy named Dr. Janowski, who is mentioned specifically in Holmes' presentation. So we know that Janowski was directly connected to Holmes, specifically, not just through the mentor Jacobson.
Wow.
So at the Salk Institute, Jacobson and Eagleman were working under Dr. Terence Janowski. He was the Francis Crick professor and the head of computational neurobiology lab at Salk Institute. Janowski, in 2008, wrote that since early brain research conducted by the Rand Corporation in 1980, we know a lot about the brain, perhaps more than we need to know.
Right. Yeah. I remember. I totally remember that quote now. I think I even put that in my episode as well, because I felt like it was such
so weird.
It's such a revealing quote, honestly, as far as the statement itself.
He's outright telling you like that this is what they know and what they're doing. They have these capabilities, just like Jacobson saying, we can totally mess with temporal order, and we can induce illusions into people that cause them to perceive an action that already happened preceding the one before it. So like totally taking somebody's mental thoughts and putting them out of order, like scrambling somebody's brain. Literally, he's saying that like they do that routinely, which is disturbing. In 2001, Dr. Janowski worked with the CIA to develop facial recognition and analysis systems to detect when a person is lying.
Oh my God. Wow. Jesus, dude. This is incredible, honestly.
It's so insane. I don't even know what to make of it. 3 of his research papers were located in Box 58 at the System Development Foundation in Palo Alto. The System Development Corporation was created in the 1950s as a nonprofit entity and has an archival depository relationship with the Rand Corporation. So there you go. Janowski was a key figure, by the way, in MK Ultra. And when you look at what Jacobson, Janowski, Eagleman were researching, temporal lobe illusion manipulation, it sounds very similar to SRI's spatial temporal remote viewing projects.
Right.
So that's also interesting.
Hell yeah.
As well.
That is too crazy, honestly. I just, in every way, this case is one of the best you can point to, right? As far as, obviously, in every single facet of the official narrative, right? It's just, you cannot accept it at face value unless you didn't at all pay attention. And that's what they're banking on, honestly, more than anything. They're sort of hoping that you are among the general public who just effectively have been conditioned to not ask questions, right? And essentially, we've all been overly conditioned to become subservient to the state at so many different levels, subconsciously. I believe that it becomes very difficult for people to break free, just psychologically, in order to find the right questions to even ask, and so it's like you're starting at basically just ground zero, stage 1. You're already at an inherent disadvantage, and I think that's also by design, clearly. And you look at how they utilize fear to, of course, as a tool to achieve this just extraordinary level of total social control, right? And just lay the groundwork for so many of these upside down inverted moral principles that I think that we owe it to ourselves to clearly dig deeper and expose much more of at least find out for ourselves some way, somehow, in terms of before you decide where to put it, compartmentalized in your brain, right? I feel as if you owe it to yourself to take these precautionary measures, especially in the modern environment that we find ourselves in, with this deliberate deception and smoke and mirrors at every layer. You know, it's intended to, you know, the news cycle itself is so just, you know, over extraordinarily as far as just the pace, right?
Yeah.
In no way are we equipped to kind of interact and engage with this at a level to where it doesn't cause us to at least feel as if we're losing some sense of control, as far as just like having any real effective impact on society at large. And I'm not under the false impression that I myself do, but I think it's very important that you at least get there, you know, in the own framework of your own mind in terms of the current power paradigm. So you don't fall victim into these obviously preordained ideological prisons that are intended to cause you to, one, disrupt the nuclear family in every way, at the very least, you know, disrupt your ability to have relationships that are worthwhile. And you should clearly have, in my mind, it's a personal thing. I witness it firsthand. I feel like we all do at this point, where it's infiltrated our family dynamic and disrupted it to such an extent to where it's almost impossible to have the same relationships we once did. And that's all because of this strange political factor that now reigns supreme. It takes priority over what? Considering the best interest of the people you should love more than anything in this world. Like that's mind control. I mean, that's
Exactly.
right.
That's mass mind control.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. It's sad. You know, and I think too, like, look at how kids are being raised on these devices now. They call them iPad kids, of like these kids who have no attention span. Think about that they cannot even focus for any extended amount of time. They need constant stimulation, constantly moving visuals. They have these TikTok videos, which are designed to rapid fire, you know, boom, 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 one thing, then another. And that's like conditioning their brains while they're young and their brains are still developing to not think about things on a deep level. It's superficial, very fast, very quick. And I think about like when we switched to the 24-hour news cycle too. If you remember the Columbine footage, it was wall-to-wall footage of nonsense, though. It was not about the actual case, any investigation into the events that occurred, into what Jefferson County Sheriff was doing that day. Right. There was no actual look at what eyewitnesses reported, hundreds of them that reported multiple shooters that day. It's just, it's wall-to-wall nonsense. And the way that they covered it too, where, you know, they're putting cameras right up in people's faces, like as they're, you know, walking away crying, and it's designed to like emotionally impact you. And then they start pushing on the gun control and, you know, bullying in school and all this other nonsense. The idea that those two were bullied is false. A number of other things that were falsely reported. You know, they were blaming Marilyn Manson and like all violent video games, doom, and, you know, not looking at the real issues, but that's what they make the story. And then the story they make becomes reality. And it's interesting because part of Holmes' mentors, what they were teaching was that changing perception of the past is literally changing the past itself together with the memory of it. And that if you can change your perception of the past, you can change other people's perceptions of an event. So that is really disturbing. And they also claim that like any medium that records the event will also change. That
Interesting.
is very weird. And it sounds like something an occultist would say, doesn't it? Like this
Right.
magical theory of how reality works and how it can be manipulated, even
It
retroactively,
sounds like the
changing.
Mandela effect to a certain
It
extent, right? Like
does.
a
Does
little
it
bit.
not?
Yes, it does.
It
And
is very weird.
you consider, yeah, I mean, you bring up Columbine, just how it obviously it relates to this case, not only in terms of the geographical distance between the two events, but even you had victims from Columbine who were allegedly on the jury, which is just like,
Yes.
what? Like, how is this not a conflict of interest at a certain level? Like, honestly, yeah,
Multiple
man,
ones.
that's just crazy. That alone, but then you consider that we were talking privately, which is why it took so long for us to start the show. We it's just something. First of all, I already have an issue with not being able to shut my mouth in terms of just passionately discussing these things privately, but it feels as if Christina suffers from the same plight. So I
Oh,
think that,
yes.
yeah. But I absolutely loved it. And but yeah, I do apologize for the late start. But I will say that what we were discussing privately was very much on just as far as it plays perfectly into this exact same playbook of what took place in terms of the James Holmes case and the Aurora, Colorado Cinema 16 shooting, and that is Columbine, which you mentioned, and how obviously it's crazy. I read this one individual graduate from Columbine High School had given her own personal she had given an interview statement basically, and then provided like a sort of written statement to these reporters and investigative reporters, and her name was Tara Becker, and she was a student at Columbine High School, right? And she claims this was in '85 that she went to these pro-family conferences in Colorado to tell these attendees and warn them about death education at school being implemented and effectively, as far as just administered to the children who were a part of those classes in this very strange way that would have a sort of traumatic impact on them, and was even causing a rise in statistical suicide in children. Yeah, which is like to have a direct effect where your curriculum is causing children to self-harm, and then even worse, which I mean, as far as just imagining this sort of exposure, obviously triggering them into potentially pursuing some sort of violent action, right? Which obviously they, I believe, was potentially part of the plan in certain ways. How you would obviously create this, again, another pool of children that you could draw upon at any time or point in time, where you could then help, at least considering their family background, the dynamic where they live, how they're being raised, and then I would imagine effectively surround them with operatives that would intend on, right, have the intention of sort of luring them into the modern Manchurian program that we mentioned before, and then whenever the time comes, having the green light go, sort of trigger mechanism in place. But for her to actually address this and claim that, she believes obviously that, well, first of all, there was another student who listened to what she had claimed, and then she effectively gave her own testimony about what Tara Becker had sort of said and experienced in school. And she claimed that she would compile sort of this booklet for her school classes, and it called it The Masquerade. And it was full of this subliminal pictures and these prose. Yes. And so Tara explained that she had been taught to use the hidden double meaning, subliminals, and how she had focused so much of her time and attention on death that she herself had tried to commit suicide. This is a girl who graduated from Columbine High School, and Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold both participated in this, specifically this death curriculum, while they attended Columbine as well. Come on.
And
now.
wasn't it also like, I think I remember her saying that part of the things that they were being taught was that, like, after they died, they would be like in this like magical play. It was very bizarre.
Check it out. This is so crazy. It's literally, it plays into what I mentioned a moment ago, the Temple of Set, the black flame, the right, and this strange like becoming your own god in this occult sense. And so yes, she explained that the subject of death was integrated into many of these courses at her school, and that she said death was made to look glamorous, that living was hard, and that reincarnation would solve their problems. Students were told that they would always return to a much better life form. They would return to the, quote, oversoul and become like God. I mean, imagine that. That's so crazy.
It's interesting in light of like the writings of Eric Harris,
Right?
specifically.
Exactly.
And
Gerald
he's
Hall says
talking
they were
about like
taking
wanting to
kids
be
to
godlike.
morgues. Wanting to
Yeah.
be godlike, you said, is what
Yeah.
he's talking. Yeah. My God. That's so crazy. He says this is 100% Processian theology. Hey, I wouldn't at all be opposed to that being the case, honestly, as
Yeah,
far as how
right.
much, it's crazy how much that plays a role into this. But yeah, the only other part, she also claimed that after one of her schoolmates committed suicide, there was a talk that was given to the children, and it was legitimately Suicide Talking Day is what it was called. And every class was forced to talk specifically about death. And the assignments that were given to the
Nuts.
students were to write their own obituaries and suicide letters.
Oh my God.
They were told
Wow.
to trust their own judgment in choosing whether to live or die.
Oh my God.
Right.
This is psychotic.
Psychotic.
I
man.
cannot believe that, like, where were their parents? You know, like, well, this is going on.
No kidding.
You know, and I think the same thing with like, you know, Eric and Dylan. Where were their parents while they were amassing all of these pipe bombs and, you know, building the CO2 cartridges and the little VHS canisters? And it's just very bizarre all around.
All around. I heard
Wow.
Chris Graves. He was this Chris Graves, I think is his name. He went on. He's a researcher who went on like Charlie Robinson, macroaggressions, right? I always love Charlie. He's good people, but he had this guy on a long time ago. I can't remember when. He's had him on a couple times, but he came on and he talked about Columbine, and he discussed how basically he believed that essentially there are these towns, at least like legitimately Littleton, he believes the town itself is a safe community. That's what he called it. That it was basically a CIA safe house, but an entire town.
Yeah.
and that apparently that would help at the very least address the FEMA comms van and these major generals on the ground and
NATO vehicle.
Yeah, the NATO vehicle. That's just so crazy. And then Susan Klebold, who claimed that she speculated that Wayne Harris had mind control manuals, right, at his property, and that essentially that she believed that was far more likely the plausible case than obviously the official narrative. But I mean, that's parents of the individual perpetrators, right, allegedly, that are making that claim. So it's hard to just dismiss that clearly, especially when she's talking specifically about behavioral modification, you know, and in these programs. But
Eric Harris lived on Plattsburgh Air Force Base for a number of years, even I think after it had been officially decommissioned, which is interesting. And that's up there by Montauk and, you know,
oh my God,
how many underground levels to that base. There's suspicious things that were going on there. And I did read that a friend of Eric Harris's from New York at the time said that he had complained about being like drugged while he was at Plattsburgh.
Oh my God. That fits
It's
perfectly.
very weird. Yeah. And Lockheed Martin's presence in Littleton, Colorado, it was basically a Lockheed town.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's what they were claiming. And I think it was, who was it? I think it was, as far as like the Lockheed connection to James Holmes, I think there was a legitimate Lockheed connection there as well. I'm trying to remember now what it was. But I definitely, just as far as the strange, like evidence of the pharmaceutical prescription drugs that were then sort of like blacked out by the judge, right? Who specifically during the trial made sure that was one of the things that were sort of blacked out and not made public, was that. And there were a couple of other things that specifically drew my attention as far as what they would prefer not be public. And
like
what was
everything. If it was up to them,
Mhm.
you wouldn't even have been able to read the docket.
Right. And I think that also just the notion of seriously like realizing the fact that you had these clear and obvious signs of dissociative identity disorder and split personality of James Holmes during the trial itself, which gives the opportunity. We could play that video if you want here in a moment.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. That's so crazy.
It is sad, but it's also funny. It's a funny video. One thing I want to add too about the Anschutz Medical Center campus. So it's very clear, by the way, that the government paid for all of Holmes' gear and ammunition because he didn't have a job. He had these grants from the school and he would get them dispersed like $5,000 payments at a time. And so it was also reported he had 90 packages sent to the school of ammo companies. And like,
wow,
how did that really, like, they didn't know that this was happening, but he had 90 packages sent to the school. Okay.
That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous.
The Anschutz Medical Campus, I think I said earlier, was previously the Fitzsimmons Medical Center, and Aurora is very close to Buckley Air Force Base. So there's, these connections there. During the Cold War, Buckley Air Force Base was the Navy Air Station, Denver. And during the various, wars of aggression, like Desert Storm, Operation Northern Watch, Operation Iraqi Freedom, that was a big hub. And Dr. Fenton, who would treat James Holmes at the school, if you look at her resume, they deleted it off of the website, by the way, for the school, and then they altered it and put it back up. But she was the chief of medicine for the Air Force during Desert Storm.
Oh my God! All right. I'm very much under the impression that many of the Green Berets were sort of forced, especially just in terms of the special forces operatives, the more kind of the exclusive operations that they would be tasked with. I think they were far more likely. There was this sort of inner circle within the special forces that were forced to endure these behavioral modification techniques as a part of their training. And were essentially, many of them, as far as like, they were conditioned to then be useful assets within the framework of their domestic application once they came home. And that consistently
I think of Timothy McVeigh.
That's exactly what I thought of too.
McVeigh talking about being chipped and, Yep.
Yeah. And the dental offices or the office that he was going to. So I found in the Alex Constantine archive a while back, when I was just researching Waco, to a deeper extent, I found specifically the report and these sort of like very disturbing details in terms of how often he was going to this dental facility, and that this was allegedly the location where he was given the molar that behaved as this sort of is essentially a brain chip, right, in this sort of molar implant form. And this was one of their effective ways of controlling an asset through this Manchurian candidate situation scenario, whatever. But the point is that clearly this consistently occurs. And by the way, I believe it was the death row inmate who came out and said that, that was what he continued to tell anyone who would listen, is basically he would be administered these drugs, but he would also be given the counteracting substances necessary to keep him from effectively dying and his heart rate going too low. And then he would be sort of whisked away. And another reason why now I'm under the impression it's far more likely that they probably just would have burned their asset who was overexposed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and also imagine Louis Jolyon West and his role of going in and giving him his personal psych eval, and obviously what happened when he went and talked to Jack Ruby. He started hearing Jews burned alive outside of his cell and lost his mind, unable to return. And you wonder if, is it possible that I believe it is, that Dr. Jolly went in there and potentially would have sort of in a way implemented this even through post-hypnotic suggestion, this conditioning mechanism in place where you legitimately do believe, you are under the belief that you will be saved at the end of the day, and therefore you'll effectively go through the programming to its extent. And that's what it seems like, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's so weird, all of these connections. And I think about Dr. Reed, who would do the psychiatric evaluations of James Holmes. And he also had a undisclosed year of military service. What kind, we don't know, in his past. And it's funny because prior to, and you probably know this, prior to Dr. Reed being brought in, Holmes had been evaluated by Dr. Metzer, and the court did not like Metzer's report because he specifically said this was like induced. He said mental illness induced, but it's sort of like there's something very fishy going on here. One thing to add too is the CIA's National Resource Division spent $20 million to relocate its employees to the Colorado Badlands and Denver. So there is not just Lockheed, but like you said, big CIA presence there.
Right. Yeah, I thought the James Holmes sanity eval is just absolutely absurd. Whenever you just read through it's so clear and obvious to me that the mind rapist allegations that he was kind of making in terms of his therapist and his psychiatrist, it felt as if he legitimately was forced to, he was programmed to essentially go through with these certain actions or the kill switch would be triggered. And I think that, again, that plays into very much, and it's also reinforced by Stephen Unruh, right? That crazy witness who was institutional, or like at least apprehended in the same holding cell area as James Holmes at the time. And then he's like, he's talking about neurolinguistic programming, right? And then a psychiatrist programmed him to kill, which is just so insane that he would actually say something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It is insane. And so one thing I want to add to this, Holmes had texted a friend. This was in, I think it was right before, maybe 2 weeks before the event. He texted a friend and he asked her if she had ever heard of dysphoric mania, which is a form of bipolar disorder that combines the frenetic energy of mania with the agitation, dark thoughts, and in some cases, paranoid delusions of major depression. She told him, could this be treated? And he said that she needed to stay away from him because he's bad news. And that was the last time she heard from him. And when you read his notebook and some of the things that he also reported, it's very clear that he kind of knew something was happening to him. He didn't necessarily know what, but he knew Fenton was involved, Dr. Fenton. And it was like there are times where I think he was trying to break out of his programming because he claimed in his numerous interviews with Dr. Reed that prior to going in to the theater, he had this moment where he called the mental health line, and the call was prevented from going through. It didn't even ring. He said for 9 to 10 seconds, he was on this call, but then the operator reported that they couldn't hear anything either. So they were both it's almost like there was some interference with that. And he's like, well, why did you make the call? And he's like, I just wanted one last chance, like, to be stopped, basically, you know, to like not do it. And then he said that he kept waiting for the FBI to stop him. And he's like, you know, the psychiatrist asked, why would you think that the FBI would be even like know about you? And he's like, oh, because, you know, in the weeks prior to this, they'd been monitoring me. And he goes, well, how do you know? And he goes, well, it said FBI on the van. And then in Dr. Reed's evaluation, he makes an actual note where he says that the FBI actually was at this shooting range that he was at, where he said he saw them watching him. And so he just assumed he was going to be stopped. And it was like he was programmed to carry out these actions and kept waiting for somebody to stop him. And, you know, it was clear that he'd gone to Dr. Fenton for help and that she did the opposite of helping him.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what it seems like happened. And especially as far as like the dissociative state that he remained in during the trial. I think that points to how already suggestible, how just extraordinarily suggestible he truly was psychologically. I think that was something that always blew me away with Sirhan, was just the hypnotist, the professional hypnotist involved, and the psychiatrist, expert in criminology, who claimed that when he hypnotized Sirhan, and he basically went to the prison, gave him through hypnosis, gave him a set of instructions through post-hypnotic suggestion for him to behave in a monkey routine, basically perform a monkey routine in the cell. And so he triggers the instruction mechanism and his this sort of through the hypnotic trance, and then essentially Sirhan starts climbing the bars in the cell and behaving like a monkey, and he essentially snaps him out of the hypnotic trance, and he had no memory of performing the monkey routine. But the psychiatrist was like, it proved to me that he had been clearly hypnotized far too many times in the past, like at a level that is unheard of, or he wouldn't have been so suggestible for that to have obviously been so easy to force him to effectively kind of like exercise that ridiculous performance. But to me, it's not at all surprising, especially this role of the psychiatrist, right, and the strange chronic homicidal thinking that he then began to, right, these strange urges, right. Just to me, I don't know, man, it seems like all the signs that he was showing throughout the trial, it perfectly aligns to them legitimately keeping him in this strange dissociative state, right? And I think that it was all in an effort to gain these sort of false incriminating statements, right, which they always rely upon. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was 2 years between when he was arrested in 2012 to 2014 when they would actually sit him down for the interviews with Dr. Reed. Prior to that, if you read about how he was presenting in incarceration, it's clear he is completely out of his mind. And I will get into some of those details. But they pumped him full of drugs and they had 2 years to prep him for these sit-down interviews where he doesn't move. He hardly blinks for 4 to 5 hours at a time during these interviews. It's like you can tell he's so high. He has this delayed speech response. You know, he's asked a question and there's like a delay and then a very short, weird response. And it's so different from the video that we saw of him from his Salk Institute science camp, where he's doing the presentation and you see him talking and he's confident and he's speaking, normally at a normal pace. And you just go, my God, like what happened to this guy? A number of things with that trial, like Judge Sylvester put the gag order immediately on the case and was making it so that you could not even read the docket to see what filings were being made. That was unprecedented. I have not seen any other high profile or any case at all where that would happen. I think it took a consortium of 21 news agencies working together to get some, not all, but just some of that gag order lifted. And then there was the fact that in 2013, the judge came up with a court order to have James Holmes be given truth drugs to refresh his memory about his state of mind during the event.
So
Truth
crazy.
serum, literal MK Ultra stuff.
Right.
And
it was
so
in the context too, right, where the judge claims like the truth serum should be tested should he plead not guilty by reasons of insanity.
Right, which he obviously was going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that I looked up to how often anybody is subjected to the narcoanalytic review. And this is like, again, unheard of. So just that in itself, the gag order, we're going to administer truth serum drugs to him, MK Ultra style with a team of psychiatrists and CIA people to be on hand to advise them. Yeah, it's a little bit strange.
Yeah. William Sylvester rules that in the event of Holmes pleading insanity, his prosecutors would be permitted to interrogate him while he is under the influence of a medical drug designed to loosen him up and get him to talk.
It's so awful. I shouldn't be laughing, but it's terrible. And
True.
one thing I want to add to this is that David Eagleman, who we discussed earlier, one of Holmes' mentors that worked very closely with John Jacobson, his other mentor, Eagleman was part of a foundation called the Long Now Foundation. Stuart Brand was on that board. Steven Pinker, Jeffrey Epstein associate as well. And Brand was a key agent of MK Ultra who downplayed concerns that the cybernetics group plan of developing the personal computer was aimed at creating Big Brother by marketing its tool to empower the masses. Obviously, that was the goal of getting people to use the networked computers and all of that. So, direct connections to MK Ultra via people like Eagleman, Jacobson, Janowski, and Brand. Right. So there's that. Holmes had been put on by Dr. Fenton. He was put on 2 mind-altering drugs. So the first one he was given was sertraline. That's a generic for Zoloft, and which is an SSRI. He was also given clonazepam, which is the generic for Klonopin, a benzodiazepine.
No way. Are you serious? That is interesting to me.
That combination.
Yeah.
And so it is disturbing if you've read like some of the side effects of Zoloft is agitation, irritability, anxiety, hostility, aggressiveness, hallucinations, mania, impulsivity, delusions. All of these, by the way, are present with Holmes. And so he had complained, Dr. Fenton put him on the sertraline and the clonazepam. He complained about these manic episodes that he was experiencing, and then she increased the sertraline instead of taking him off of it, which she should have done. She didn't do, and so he ended up seeing 3 different psychiatrists while at the University of Colorado. It wasn't just Dr. Fenton. She brought in another doctor, I believe, Dr. Feinstein was his name, and then there was one other person. They all saw him. And here's another.
Name again? Say that one more time.
Yeah, Dr. Feinstein.
Hold on, Christina. Oh my God. I gotta address this. City Break Dancer Man, you're my brother. Thank you so much. And we both, I imagine, appreciate that sentiment as far as having a good weekend. So thank you very much, my friend. And Christina, pick up where you left off. Honestly, I'm gonna run grab something to drink, but keep going. I'm listening. I'll be right back. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be right back.
I have a lot to cover. I feel so bad because we're already 2 hours in.
Hey, you tell me when to pull the plug, and I'll pull the plug. All right, but I'm very eager to learn more. So go ahead and keep going.
So I think Dr. Fenton was kind of creating a cover paper trail for herself, right? She was treating Holmes, giving him all of these medications. He was getting worse. He was reporting that to her. And then she's saying behind the scenes, she's warning people about him. She had brought his name to the attention of the university's behavioral evaluation and threat assessment beta team. And she flagged him as a person that could be a threat. And then she claimed that she was so alarmed by his behavior that she notified law enforcement. And that when she came to them with these concerns, they asked her, do you want to have him like committed? And she said no. So no further action was taken after she reported him to the behavioral threat assessment team. And that's, by the way, a team that she herself created at the university. She created the beta team. So that's also interesting. Now, I want to talk about Fenton. So Dr. Fenton she had her initial biography removed from the university website when her name first came out as one of the people who had treated James Holmes, because people at the time were like, what the hell? But this is what I grabbed from her resume before it was removed. You can find it archived. She is listed as the medical director of Student Mental Health Services, University of Colorado, Anschutz Medical Campus. She is a research fellow and instructor for the Research and Development Service at the VA. So VA healthcare treating veterans. Interesting. She was a physician for Colorado Rehab and Occupational Medicine. She was the chief of physical medicine for the Air Force during Desert Storm. She was a staff psychiatrist at Whitford Hall, U.S. Air Force Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. And she had an investigator award for training and research from the Department of Veteran Affairs. So she has worked with the VA. She got a Medal of Commendation from the Air Force. She wrote a book about Holmes, but she distances herself from him on her current biography, which I find to be very interesting. She is supposed to be an expert in schizophrenia. Also interesting. So I'll just read from what her current bio says. She's a board-certified psychiatrist with extensive experience treating a wide range of psychiatric conditions. After serving on the psychiatry faculty of the University of Colorado School of Medicine for 15 years, she transitioned to private practice, where she offers tailored treatment plans for patients aged 13 and up. Her expertise encompasses complex medical cases, peripartum conditions, and other psychiatric disorders, and she ensures each patient receives comprehensive and compassionate care, while James Holmes certainly didn't get that. Right. She has a graduate from Chicago Medical School, where she got her medical degree in '86, board certified in psychiatry. She completed her certification in 2008 and is board certified in physical medicine and rehab. She was also an acupuncturist, where she claimed that you could, this is going to sound ridiculous, you could enhance the bust of women through acupuncture.
No, are you kidding me? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Hold on. Who's researching this, and at what point in time was this being conducted? Do you remember the actual date?
I think that was in the 80s when she was doing acupuncture.
And what's her name again?
Dr. Lynn Fenton, and it's spelled Lynne, acupuncture. And she said that you could enhance the size of women's breasts through acupuncture. Man. It's just so bizarre. Like, you could not make this stuff up if you wanted to. So she also completed the Master of Psychopharmacology. Oh, excuse me. I've got like makeup going into my eye that's stinging.
You're good.
Yikes. Master's in Psychopharmacology at the Neuroscience Education Institute. So there's that. And also, I should add, she was disciplined by the Colorado Medical Board in 2004 for prescribing herself Xanax while her mother was dying. She also
Really?
was disciplined for prescribing the sleep aid Ambien and other medications for her husband and painkillers for an employee who suffered from chronic headaches. And Dr. Fenton also has a security clearance.
Oh my God. Well, that to me shows signs of obviously just, lack of moral fiber, being one of them, obviously, just as far as if that wasn't already obvious as a part of her strange kind of personality. And what type of person would even pursue this sort of research? You have to be sociopathic at a certain level, you would imagine, or some way, somehow you've been able to compartmentalize the ethical sort of consequential nature of the research itself. I'm not sure how people kind of sleep at night, but it seems to be far easier than, I don't know. I'm incapable of sleeping, and and I'm certainly not pursuing any sort of strange sadistic agenda, right? So I just but obviously I think you have to be.
It's a specific personality, I think. You have to have that personality. I mean, think about, too, how many doctors, nurses participated in MK Ultra research when that was happening across universities in America, at medical centers, on military bases. That took the participation of a lot of people. And it's insane for us thinking about it now. I mean, I remember one of these experiments, they literally pumped a guy full of LSD. They cut open his skull while he was fully awake, and they were removing chunks of his brain and asking him if he noticed any difference. I
remember that.
That is the kind of thing they were doing to people in the 60s and 70s.
You know who you're I believe it was, what's crazy? I covered that in this episode. That legitimately at the very beginning, to sort of stage the just kind of lay the stage in terms of or set the stage in terms of the obvious willingness of these medical, just as far as individuals within the medical profession who are very content and eager to pursue these sort of methods of torture in the name of science. And I covered that at the beginning of mine because it was who you mentioned. And by the way, there are other very strange cases, obviously, from Tulane University. There's so many connections to David Ferry being one of the key operatives who were helping at least provide some of the individual who would be experimented upon to the scientists that were working on behalf of the agency through Tulane, which makes sense why he would be sort of a major part of supplying these strange individual young people for this very purpose, especially when you consider his role as the head of the Louisiana Civil Air Patrol and obviously Lee Harvey Oswald being a teenager and being a member of the Civil Air Patrol, right, with David Ferry and guess who else? Barry Seal, right?
Oh my God!
He met Lee Harvey Oswald in the Louisiana Civil Air Patrol, and as they were teenagers. And also, what's crazy is there are claims that David Ferry was using, basically, he was using mind control manuals and methods of hypnotism to hypnotize his young Civil Air Patrol cadets and then rape them.
Oh my God, that is disturbing.
100%. And he was taking some of these members of the CAP down to Cuba. And they were engaging in covert operations.
You can't make this, you couldn't make it up if you wanted to. The truth really is stranger than fiction. It is bizarre.
Absolutely.
And so Dr. Reed, the guy who ended up doing the final interviews with him that were then, he's pumped full of drugs, 5 different medications he's on. And Dr. Reed kind of walks him through making these incriminating statements that were then played in court in total violation of his Sixth Amendment right. It's outrageous. So Dr. Reed, he did his residency at UC Davis in the 70s and took a year-long hiatus from his program for undisclosed military service.
When was this? Tell me again.
This was in the 70s.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. William Reed, R-E-I-D. And one quote that I noted that he, during his interviews with Holmes, he says this: though this is a minor detail, this is what he writes in his notes, he frequently had noticeably dilated pupils in his eyes. I can't really relate that to anything significant, but it was quite strange, especially since he didn't make any comments along the lines of, wow, these lights are bright. And it's fascinating because when Holmes was arrested, the police noted how his pupils were huge, but Holmes said prior to the event, he had taken 100 milligrams of Vicodin, which would constrict the pupils. They would be like pinned because they're opiates. So why does he always have these massive pupils? And then I think back to the Salk Institute when they were working with DARPA on the flavanol that had the blood dilating effect as part of their super soldier, like peak soldier program or whatever. Yeah, like why are his eyes always massively dilated to the point where the police are saying it, Dr. Reed is saying it more than once? It's strange, and you can see it in pictures of him. Look at some of the pictures of him from the trial, and if you want to play that clip now of him with the, this is the state this man was in after being arrested. You'll see it for yourself. It is not normal. No,
not at all. Do you want me to play the video?
Yeah, it's very short. It's less than 2 minutes,
though.
But it's weird.
Absolutely. And on top of that, we'll have to, at some point, we'll find a time that we can play that strange witness, right, who made multiple interviews where he was claiming and like giving detailed description and reinforcing what some of the other witnesses were claiming about leading up to the shooting, and how James Holmes was already in the theater, and then he stood up basically and then propped open the door, but he took a phone call first. And you had mentioned the phone call, and I feel like
he was motioning to people.
Oh my God, the details of that. It feels like, this was an operation, knowing how there's like this entire back to behind the screen itself. There was this huge area that they could have actually stationed people. They could have stationed people well behind the screens to even launch the initial tear gas, which I'm just considering as being a possibility if there were individual operatives on the ground waiting to kind of perform this operation. And then obviously I would imagine that James Holmes would just be programmed to go stand or get back into his car, whatever the case was. I'm not entirely certain, but it makes a lot more sense as to why he was described as being in a sort of hypnotic trance whenever he was apprehended by the authorities. I don't know, it just fits too well. But this is exactly, as you were describing, a perfect window into the state of mind, right? The mental state of James Holmes.
I think that's the Corbin Dates video you've got pulled up here.
Oh, for real?
Yeah. So that's this is the witness you were talking about.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Dates in a moment, because it's not just him. There were people in Theater 8 who also reported somebody in their theater as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it definitely felt as if there were more than one perpetrator. And especially when you hear the police scanners, right? When you listen to that, they're talking about this other alleged perpetrator, or at least potential perpetrator, in like a white and blue flannel, I think is what they legitimately mentioned. You're like, hold on. And then you had I mean, it is fascinating listening to the calls, because they're so desperate for gas masks as well. Like, why are they not equipped for this? You know, in terms of the response, it doesn't make sense. But very strange.
Yeah, this is Holmes right after his arrest.
It's what he's made out of his cup and his water bottle. Okay. All right, cool. Hey, what I need to do is I need to have you put these on your hands. What?
What the
so weird.
All the way. know what this is for? It's what I'm asking. Huh? What do you think it's for? Popcorn. For popcorn?
Popcorn.
Could be
He
used
thinks it's for popcorn.
But not right now. Yep.
Man,
It's so sad, but so
it
funny.
really is. For real. Yeah, he's nowhere to be found, psychologically speaking.
No. He's
Yeah.
just, this is like a child almost.
Truly.
He does not have a shirt on, no.
Does he actually start shadowboxing? I don't remember that part.
No, this is he's doing puppets with the
Puppets.
bags. And listen to the conversation the puppets are having.
That is so creepy, man.
Look at the speed too at which he's like moving his hands to make that sound. It's interesting because some of the things he reported in his notebook was experiencing hyperspeed for several days at a time. And then he would have days where separated, punctuated by periods of catatonia. So that's concerning. One other parallel to Columbine is the fact that, you know, I'm sure you're aware of all the people who have died under suspicious circumstances associated with that. And I think the same thing possibly with Sandy Hook. I know there's at least one of them who's died. The nurse who helped treat victims of Aurora drowned while on family vacation in Iowa. Her name was Jennifer Gallagher. Her body was found the next day, according to the sheriff's office. She had worked at the University of Colorado Hospital for 13 years and cared especially for a shooting victim treated in the neurological intensive care unit that she helped open. She was among some of the staffers who met with Barack Obama during his visit 2 days after the event.
God, oh my God, Christina, that is like exactly the feeling I got from the Omar Mateen situation, and having like Sadiq Mateen, who's so clearly just working for the Pakistani ISI, cut out on behalf of the CIA, for quite some time, running media propaganda narratives on behalf of the agency. And then he's legitimately seen just after the Pulse nightclub shooting, where his son was the alleged perpetrator and sole perpetrator at that, if we're supposed to believe. Yeah. And where's Sadiq? Where's the father with the glowing spook background? He just so happens to be at the Clinton rally, positioned specifically behind Hillary on the camera, on the actual. No, that is not by accident. That is by design. Right. They coordinate who exactly is in the picture frame of the actual camera footage that is going live to the public. Yep. And he's holding a sign about how much he supports Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. And then even gives a local media interview to the press following the political rally, where he reinforces that claim that Donald Trump would be, I forget the actual quote of his. Yeah, very interesting. For sure.
It's crazy. Another interesting thing with Aurora is the exercise that was going on, which we also saw with Sandy Hook. And we also saw with Columbine, who had an exercise several days before the event for the same type of situation too, which is fascinating. So this is interesting. They had a classroom learning exercise the same day in a medical school in Parker. Rocky Vista University of Osteopathic Medicine was in the middle of holding specialized classes in disaster life support for 150 second-year medical students. One of the scenarios being used to train the students was how to respond if a shooter fires at people in a movie theater and also uses a bomb.
No, Christina, that is a smoking gun if I've ever heard one. That sounds that is far too
An
extraordinary.
exercise for the exact scenario at another university medical school. You can't make it up if you wanted to. And then there is the FBI foreknowledge, the FBI roll call release from May 17th, 2012, that specifically warned about theater attacks. So that's 2 months before Aurora. They said terrorists interested in attacking theaters and similar mass gatherings. And of course, they frame this as like a Islamic terrorism. But it is interesting when we consider how James said that he was being watched by the FBI and thought that they were going to stop him. And they put out that roll call release. Yeah, so this is from Dr. Reed's notes. He says, Holmes comments that the FBI may have been surveilling him as he implemented his mission was somewhat ambiguous, inconsistent with caution and worry about being caught. Right, sure thing. Right. But he goes on to add, the record indicates that there actually was a marked FBI SUV at the Byers Canyon shooting area while he was there. He also recalled wondering if unmarked police cars near his apartment held officers who were monitoring him.
That is so ridiculous.
It is insane.
I am trying to remember which case it was where this very similar sort of playbook came up, where there were obvious individuals who knew of the existence of a perpetrator who inevitably committed a mass shooting, but he was going to the sort of local shooting range, and essentially the same situation was set up. And there was also this very convenient sort of deniability factor that was baked into the story itself. And so this just sort of like glares to me as another way that, because if you imagine, and if you remember, and I always bring up Sirhan, but what does he claim? That he was effectively entered a hypnotic trance where he believed he saw shooting basically targets in his eyes, right? Where he was at the shooting range. And so he just went through, he was instantly in a trance where he was just sort of like naturally reacting from the trigger mechanism and the prior programming to essentially pull a trigger. And so that is the reason why I believe it's what's the name? I always forget her name now, but the individual author who wrote the book on the JFK assassination. She's really great. She's on I follow her on Twitter. I can't remember her name right now, but either way, she effectively believes that Sirhan was shooting blanks in the pantry that night at the Ambassador Hotel, and it was a distractionary tactic in order for Thane Eugene Cesar, the true hitman that was working as a sort of like in this clandestine fashion, where he's moonlighting as a security guard at the hotel on behalf, like working for the sort of plausible deniability privatized cutout that is Howard Hughes kind of like clandestine infrastructure, that he was again called by Nixon himself as VP, who asked Howard to provide that plausible deniability by setting up these domestic black site and things of that nature. Yeah, to train up these Cuban exiles, right? And then guess what happens? I mean, they green light go these operations anytime around the domestic U.S., and they can utilize either what clearly are hitmen for this sort of organized crime syndicate that's being leveraged and used as a tool by the intelligence apparatus. But that's what they do, right? Mm-hmm. They sort of it's crazy because I just did a film analysis of Inherent Vice with JJ Vance from Operation GCD, and it was so much fun, honestly, because. And I would like to do a little bit more of that maybe in the future, just because it is like some of the pop culture references and how valuable they are to introducing these concepts to the public. I think it's so important. But then again, the layered plot of Inherent Vice, right, where you see they're directly mentioning COINTELPRO, right? They're clearly, the FBI is utilizing a biker gang, a neo-Nazi biker gang, to run security for their operations. But not only that, they're actually using one of the most violent individuals within the leadership of the biker gang to perform targeted assassinations and political executions on the behalf of the intelligence apparatus. And again, it's like, this is the name of the game, man.
Exactly.
They've been holding hands in this very way, coexisting for generations. And we are now becoming, I think, just too aware of this very specific playbook that obviously it seems to effectively achieve the goals that they hope to, that they so desperately desire, to implement in terms of modern society. But at the same time, it's like, man, it just to kind of like engage at the surface level and in politics in modern day, you are running an incredible risk, and you better be extremely and extraordinarily careful, because your best interest is not being prioritized by these strange sociopaths who hope to abuse your children. It seems like most of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, go ahead.
If you want, you can play the Corbin Dates video now,
Crazy,
because
right?
I think people need to hear that, because this is like one of the first, I think, interviews, right after the fact, where he talks about somebody with a goatee, which we know James Holmes did not have. And this individual like propping open the door and motioning to somebody else to come in.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I found it very interesting. And the more I watched him, because I watched him on a lot of different, even the call-in that he gave to CNN. I watched a bunch of different appearances that Corbin Dates gave after this, at least the ones that haven't been entirely scrubbed, which I'm surprised I even can still find this one, to be honest, because so many people have tried to act as if this was later on. They disproved this. It was sort of debunked. But that didn't effectively happen at all. It was just a sort of convenient narrative that the mainstream media ran with, that they never provided any detail as far as how that was the case. But yeah, this is fascinating to hear.
What did you feel when you saw the picture of that guy?
Hold on.
What did you feel when you saw the picture of that guy in court today, Corbin, James Holmes?
Honestly, as soon as I was watching the trial on CNN today, I felt completely numb. I felt no emotion whatsoever when I was looking at the face of the gunman.
Did he look dangerous to you? Did he remind you of what you saw in the theater?
Honestly, looking at his face right now, no, he looked like an average person that you would see probably at a mall or at anywhere common. You would not put two and two together if you saw that person, and if you were there that night, you would never know.
Okay, compare him to what you saw, the gentleman you saw, or the two gentlemen, whatever you saw. Compare him to what you saw in the theater the night that that everything went.
For some reason, the frames are choppy as hell in this video, but all of them,
it's old.
The vast majority of them from these strange like witness interviews, they all seem to be very choppy and like hard to make out as far as the. Yeah, it's interesting.
Horribly.
The night in the theater, as soon as the door swung open and the person dressed all in black walked into the theater, this person had a stroll like he knew what was going on, like he knew what was supposed to happen, like it was supposed to be a walk in the park, and that he was going to have a good time. That's what it looked like.
Is there any way you can connect the two? Could you identify him as that guy, the one who killed all the 12 people and injured or wounded so many others, dozens of others?
I couldn't have identified him because the gunman was dressed all in black. You could not see anything. The only thing that was available to see was only his eyes.
Boom.
Yep.
I got to be careful about presumption of innocence, even in a case that gets so graphic as this. Let me go back quickly to Corbin Dates. Was there one or two people involved in this? I've heard that you believe there might have been two, not just one.
Uh-oh.
I couldn't speculate, but the way from what I saw prior, before the gunman walking in acted out, it seemed like there was two. But I couldn't speculate because I did not know what happened after that door had shut before it swung back open.
I think you told one of our producers that the person you saw going out of the theater to get and come back, whoever came back in, the one who went out had a goatee.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's correct, yeah. Prior to the movie even starting, when I came and got my seat at the theater, a guy walked in into the auditorium after me, sat into the very first right row, and got a phone call. Took his phone call towards the emergency exit, not the lobby, and had his foot propped open by the door. It seemed like he was making gestures of trying to find somebody or trying to have somebody come to his location to where he currently was. After that, I had already stepped out of the auditorium to bring my friend in, and when we came back, the movie was just starting, lights were dimming, and that door seemed closed.
And you testified all this in court?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Corbin Dates. I'm glad you got through it, fella. And Dr. Michael Brennan, it sounds right to me. Everything.
That's crazy, huh?
Unbelievable. Zero follow-up on like the fact that that person
Exactly.
is not James Holmes, who he is describing. That's a
Right.
good question. Yeah,
That's
is
how I-
Corbin Date still alive? So I will add to this, there were other individuals as well. Faisal Evial and Evan Morrison, they described that there was what they thought multiple people inside. So they're asked by the media, you said you saw something come from the back of the theater as well, and then the front. And Faisal says, yes, they both were thrown. They popped one after the other. After they did, he started shooting. And so Devin Suit said, I thought there were two gunmen, one throwing the gas, the other doing the shooting. We didn't know how many there were. There was a Century 16 employee who was interviewed on video. You can still find her video testimony. This was done at Gateway High School, and this is what she said. Next to the exit sign, there's two doors that lead outside directly. So what I heard from him, another eyewitness, he was sitting in the third row. They came from the exit doors from the outside. So somebody with tickets probably let them in. They do have a guy in custody, according to the news. And I think there's at least 3 people, because I saw a silhouette of a guy and all I could see was the light from the exit lights. I saw a silhouette of a guy. He was all in black, and there's 2 people on each side of him. And I think there was only one gun going off at the time, but they definitely threw the effing smoke bomb, and they threw one other thing, and either they were hiding behind the screen where there is a catwalk, or they left. And then we have James Holmes' neighbor, Abigail Quezada, who lived across the street. She told Fox News that she saw 5 hours before the event at 7 p.m., James Holmes and another guy running down 17th Avenue to his apartment.
Oh my God.
Then we have people from Theater 8. Steve Ostergaard said he was a teacher there with 10 students at the theater next door to where the attack occurred. He said about 20 minutes into, and this is the other interesting thing, where this thing had to have been a operation, right? Because the witnesses in Theater 9 said that the shooting began right at a scene where a shooting was happening. So it's confusing to people at first because they think it's the movie, or like they think that maybe somebody was dressing up in character and like, So in Theater 8, which was not airing The Dark Knight Rises, this was a different movie, but this is what Ostergaard says. 20 minutes into the movie, there's a scene where they're in a bar and there was gunfire about to start erupting. At that point, to the right of us, right by the stairwell, all of us heard hissing and then started seeing smoke. And we saw a boom and a flash that we thought were firecrackers. And then he asks, was part of the stairwell blown off like I thought I saw, because I saw an explosion? So what really happened, because it was dark in there? Like, he's even asking what really happened. Another witness, Rachel Fideli from Theater 8, said, we heard 2 pops and there was a big cloud of smoke. Then there was another pop and more smoke. We had no idea there was anything happening in Theater 9. We thought it was just in our theater. No one knew there was something happening in the theater next to us.
Right. Yeah, I remember that being the case as far as the strategic timing of the audience being already conditioned by the film itself to not necessarily react, at least immediately. And so it provided a window of opportunity for, if you were an operational, let's just say you're an operator on the ground in this sort of strange mass shooting event that you hope to at least stage, where, yes, there are going to be legitimate victims, which people do actually. Obviously, there are false flags that exist where there don't even necessarily need to be victims, right? It's more about the psychological implication of the warfare itself, right? The psi warfare, and how they kind of achieve their means just by utilizing that facet alone. But I think when there's real blood in the game, skin in the game in this way, right, it becomes far more compelling. especially to the general public, that now there has to be some sort of action taken. There has to be some way that we come to a solution, and something like this that is so tragic doesn't happen again. And you already know that's the naive mindset that they're preying upon, as far as the average individual who's just so willing because they're in fear, and all they would really prefer is to feel safe in this moment. And so they perfectly fall into place in terms of manufacturing their consent for certain land. Yeah, as we mentioned before. But yeah, I think that it is very strange that the timing of one, he like props open the door, and then he's like motioning over to other people. At least we're not certain as to who exactly is that individual. Although some people have claimed red hair, but it didn't seem like it was in the moment. It, like, you know what I mean? It felt like after the fact that was then that statement was then sort of like it was an edited statement, and then it was like restated that no, actually I think I noticed the orange hair, that type of situation. But in reality, in the moment, there was no real sort of a smoking gun as to the description of the physical description of the perpetrator, right? In any way.
No.
If anything, it seemed to do the opposite, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, he has a goatee or whatever. Yeah, there's in these initial reports, there's nothing that mentions red hair. And I think that what happens is people see the news stories, and then they see, oh, this is the suspect. And then they go, oh, like they change their stories to conform with the news because they assume that the police and the news can't possibly have it wrong. I must have missaw, or, that happens a lot. There was one odd thing that was not ever like mentioned, or there was no follow-up on, where they said James Holmes' mail was being forwarded to some guy in Pennsylvania, just some random guy. I don't know what that was about, but I couldn't find anything else besides just this story about his mail being forwarded. Like, where's the follow-up on that? That's bizarre.
Yeah, I wonder who the individual was. If he has any strange background, I'm sure. Yeah, that would be interesting.
As far as I know, Holmes does not have any connection to Pennsylvania. I mean, he was from California. Right. Then there was the second person of interest that was mentioned who went to school with Holmes. There was one news segment I could find where they mentioned this, and it was they were interviewing like a neighbor of this student who knew Holmes, and like the neighbors didn't even want to show their faces. They said that federal agents and SWAT teams raided this guy's home, and that he was in the neuroscience program with Holmes, and that he apparently had called and like threatened more violence if they didn't release Holmes. And there was like, I never heard anything about it again. It's just like, this is so bizarre. Who was that student? What was going on there? They also evacuated the school, the medical school he went to. Why did they evacuate the campus? What was going on there? No explanation. Then there was a search warrant for the second apartment. Holmes had lived in apartment 10 at the student housing. It's off campus, but it's student housing for people in like the medical program that were health studies. There was another apartment number 5 on the second floor. Holmes was on the third floor. He had booby trapped and rigged his apartment with these explosives. Right. And I found a sealed search warrant for unit number 5 in his same building. And this is what they found and they seized. They seized 2 phone lists, 1 Walgreens business card, 1 red plastic 5-gallon EnviroFlow gas container. And it's so weird because they say they basically had cleared and evacuated the area. They were trying to, they had the little bomb technician thing go into his apartment, which none of those explosives look real. It looks like it's made to look scary. There's a bunch of wires and random things. Yeah, it looks totally staged. And then the other interesting thing I noted was how sparse his apartment was, how bare, almost as if like a real person wasn't even living there. It was so strange to me. And I remember the news was reporting that he had all this Batman memorabilia. There's nothing like that. There was one Batman mask that they found behind a TV. And then it's just like an Anchorman poster in the kitchen and a Soldiers of Misfortune and Pulp Fiction poster in his bedroom, which is very sparse. And I will note, had red satin sheets. So
God.
here's the weird thing about this. This other apartment. So Detective Wilson was assisting at the scene with agents of the BATF and FBI, and they happened to advise that Holmes had used a red plastic 5-gallon gas container when setting his booby traps, and then they noticed a concerning gas container in apartment number 5. Detective Wilson found that all of the apartment units were unsecure and their entry doors were left in the open position. He went to the second floor and looked through the open door of apartment number 5. From that location, Detective Wilson observed another red-colored 5-gallon size gas container on the bedroom floor. Detective Wilson attempted contact with the resident of apartment number 5, identified as Tori Lynn Everhart. By the way, you can't find any information about Tori Lynn Everhart. Detective Wilson contacted the apartment manager, Joan Hawley, obtained a phone number for Everhart. Detective Wilson advised the phone number has been disconnected. Wilson doesn't know if Hawley or Everhart knew the suspect, James Holmes.
What the?
And there's like no follow-up on this. Who was this strange woman?
Right.
And what was the Walgreens card, the phone list, and like it's just bizarre that those are the items that they seized from the place, and there's zero explanation about what that was. That was about. I found that to be very bizarre.
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's no way around it that he was clearly, I believe, the psychiatrist that he's linked to, right? What's her name again? You mentioned it multiple times.
Lynn Fenton.
Lynn Fenton. To me, she felt like at least one of the sort of personalities that you should focus on prominently. If you're at least you should prioritize, because I believe they play a prominent role within this case specifically, and really what took place in terms of the psychological break of James Holmes. And I think that the timing of it all just fits too perfectly, as far as how he becomes a patient, and then it doesn't take that long for him to then drop out and effectively, in my mind, act out his programming. And that is really, he referred to it as a mission directly, right? And
Yep.
even like the language that he used was to me very revealing, as far as him feeling the need to actively, engage in his programming to this sort of, as if he had no other choice but to, or
He
as I
says
mentioned
that.
before, yeah,
Yeah.
they would trigger this sort of this kill switch, right? Which I think is just another sort of facet in the mind of the modern Manchurian. It's definitely been utilized more than once, right, in terms of these scandalous events.
Yeah, he said that he felt like he had to do the event in order to not kill himself, basically.
Right,
Like
to
he
suicide,
had
that's
to
what he
do it,
says.
yeah, in order to not
Let me
self-delete.
find it, because
So
I swear it. I'll
it's
pull up
weird.
it was in the Mind Rapist, I believe, when he was claiming that, right? When he was,
Yeah, that was I think in his notebook he wrote a list of things that where he had tried delaying the problem, ignoring he had all these things where he was trying to not do it, but he had to in order to not die, basically.
Right.
And then there's so you mentioned that there were Columbine, people on the jury. One thing I want to add to that is that the Holmes trial, they summoned 9,000 candidates for jury. It was the largest jury summons in history.
Are you serious?
9,000 candidates. And
I
of
didn't
that,
realize that.
listen to this. Of the jury selection of ended up with 19 women and 5 men serving. At least 2 from the jury pool of 12 primary jurors, along with 12 alternates, had ties to Columbine.
Holy dude.
So that 12 plus 2, that's 14.
That's too crazy.
Out of the whittled down 9,000 people that they could have chose from, they get 14 people. You could not make this up if you wanted to. Juror number 535 was the aunt of a Columbine survivor. Juror number 737 was a student there at the time and was a former friend of the shooters.
Oh God. No, that's no conflict of interest whatsoever, Christina. It's
Yeah,
pay no mind to the man behind the curtain there.
They wanted to kill him. They wanted him executed. They argued for the death penalty. The jury luckily could not agree to that. So they gave him 12 consecutive life sentences plus an additional 3,318 years, a sentence that is unheard of, even for people who do similar events. I've never seen anything like that before.
Right.
It's weird. And then we can talk about that notebook where he was discussing weird things, and his concept of human capital, where
so crazy, right?
Yeah, he doesn't even
You're
understand it. Like,
while you're talking, go ahead.
he cannot even explain it, doesn't even seem to understand it. It makes no sense to, if you think about the fact that he told law enforcement he booby trapped his apartment. Well, if you believe in human capital and that for every person that you, murder, you gain a point, why would you tell law enforcement? And he goes, oh, well, because, the diversion thing had already been. And the diversion theory is bizarre, too. If you get into the details of that he put a boom box in the dumpster behind his apartment that somehow was rigged to like a remote. And he thought somebody would hear the music and would turn off the boom box and then boom.
Blow up.
Yeah, like it's so weird.
That
and
is hilarious,
bizarre. But then he just tells people about it's like, so make it make sense. His notebook, he has this symbol of a 0 with a number 1 in the infinity sign, which he doesn't really know what that means, but he said he came up with the concept of ultraception, which meant an alternate idea or concept. When he spoke to Dr. Metzer, he claimed he didn't remember much about his thinking around the symbol. And it's like he can't even explain the things that he wrote. He doesn't remember most of this. He can give like a superficial answer, but whenever he's pressed for detail, like he does not have them, which is very concerning.
It's the same playbook and the same sort of evaluation psychologically that each of these sort of these prime candidates for obviously being programmed, right, in this sort of just extraordinarily suggestible psychological state, that they clearly show these very similar signs. And it's another reason why I think there's no way around the idea of his past, right? His background, his youth, right? You mentioned the idea of sort of him showing all of the signs, right, in terms of the characteristics necessary to prioritize and target an individual who would be very valuable and useful as an asset in this sort of context. And that's what we all have to be. I think we all need to consider that as just a concept alone. That way, moving forward, we can sort of, actively just interpret the media cycle as it comes in a way where it doesn't feel like you're at this inherent disadvantage we mentioned earlier, and as far as the overall conditioning of the general public, which is what these events truly do, right?
Yeah,
like at the end of the day, we've all grown numb. Am I wrong? Like, does it not feel like that? Like, even me personally, probably the overexposure of it all, but I've grown numb to certain aspects of this, not as if it doesn't emotionally affect me. It clearly does, like, or I wouldn't be doing it, but at the same time, it's like, man, I've occasionally I'll come to terms with the reality that I'm just like passively in a brief way mentioning some of the most sinister abuse that you could ever conceptualize, and just moving on, like everyone's okay. We're all, but in reality, it feels like we need to essentially have a come to Jesus moment in terms of what is truly being overrepresented in the paradigm of power in this very current form that we find ourselves just witnessing. And in every way, they are pursuing sadistic levels of abuse that you just couldn't comprehend, and the more you expose yourself to that, the more you become far more willing to at least consider and just entertain the idea of some of these more sinister operations and the sophisticated measures that are in place and have been for generations at this point, to where it's difficult to just deny it at face value. If you have any sort of just, context at all, you have any sort of accumulated knowledge, then it becomes impossible. And I just have to say, everything you've already pointed out so far, it fits the model of of the taboo. You're not supposed to talk about this, Christina, right? Like these are the details we're intended to ignore.
The average person that goes to work every single day, has kids that they're taking care of, that doesn't have the time or maybe even the inclination to really start digging into these topics, they hear something like this and think it's insane. They would look at a video like my James Holmes video and be like, what in the heck is this? Maybe if they listened to the whole thing, they would start to question. But I think even that, it's very hard for people to wrap their minds around how something like this is even possible, but yet we know that it is well documented. And in fact, it's a lot of the information about what they're doing can be found in medical journals that people just don't read, where they have almost, I would say they have operationalized and industrialized, like they took MK Ultra, modernized it, industrialized it, and now it is this pervasive to the point that, like, yes, they absolutely could do this to somebody. And talking about Dr. Fenton specifically, this page of his notebook is very important. He has a page called Self-Diagnosis of a Broken Mind. Like, he knew his mind was fractured.
Systematically entrenched is the thought that came to mind when you were describing the level of implementation, right? Operationally speaking. But go ahead. That's fascinating. That title.
It's
say
sad.
It again.
It's
one more
honestly
time. Say it one more time.
heartbreaking. Self-diagnosis of a broken mind. And you can tell he's trying to figure out what is happening to him. So he goes on to list all of the issues that he is experiencing or that he thinks he has. He thinks he has dysphoric mania since starting sertraline, which Dr. Fenton put him on, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety, OCD, PTSD. Yes.
Just the psychological compound that you mentioned a moment ago. What was it? The first one?
SERTRALINE, sertraline, and that is the generic for Zoloft. So he has, since these are like the symptoms that he's diagnosing after he's been put on these meds by Dr. Fenton. The generalized anxiety, dysphoric mania, OCD, PTSD, Asperger's syndrome or autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, body dysmorphic disorder, borderline, narcissistic, anxious, avoidant, excessive compliant personality disorder, chronic insomnia, psychosis, and then it's in parentheses, since starting sertraline.
Oh my God.
Trichotillomania. It's insane. Trichotillomania is when people pull out their hair, literally. So he reports that. Adjustment disorder. And that's interesting that he included that because remember I said he saw a childhood therapist. That's what he was diagnosed with back then. They said he had an adjustment disorder, whatever that means. Pain disorder, restless leg syndrome. And then he goes on to list the symptoms he is experiencing as he's trying to figure out what's wrong with him. He writes catatonia, excessive fatigue, isolationism, avoiding social interactions, brief periods of invincibility during which his time and actions are in hyperspeed. This he was
The puppets, Christina. What the hell,
go,
dude?
It's so weird.
That's
And he
crazy.
reports the hyperspeed from May to July of 2020. That literally the times he's seeing Dr. Fenton, which would last several days at a time with possible interludes of catatonia, tiredness, fleeting moments of things in his peripheral vision, kind of like a light flicker. At other times, spotchy movements in his peripheral vision, like a crow or a beetle. Proclivity to scan the environment with no target or object in mind. Recurring return to mirror to look at appearance. Particular attention to hairstyling. Concern with teeth and jaw. Concern with nose. Concern with his pee-pee.
What was that about hair? Wait. Hold on. You're killing me right now. So
These
first,
are all of his symptoms. Like he's going back to the
tell me
mirror to
about the
like
hair.
look at his
What was that again?
appearance. Excessive
Before the
attention.
before the PP concerns. What happened? What happened with the hair? That
Particular
just struck
attention
me.
to his hairstyling. Well, remember he talked about trichotillomania, pulling out his hair too, and then so
Yeah.
he's spurring about his hairstyle because he wants to cover the parts where he's pulling it out. He has concern with his teeth and jaw, so he needed to have the giga jaw. Concern with his nose, and the weird thing about the pee-pee, I mean, he wrote about how he had experienced some kind of like childhood issue with this, where there was some kind of chemical irritation, and he said there was a chunk of skin missing that never properly healed. Like he went into detail
From his
about
penis. That's what he said?
Yes.
Oh my
And,
god.
like,
I have
he-
to no. This is important information, Christina. Don't gloss over it. These PB problems, yeah, they affect a lot of men in the world.
It's
Okay,
true.
Christina.
That is true.
I'm just playing.
But like
Okay,
a
go
chunk of skin missing, what happened? It's very weird because
That's
it's like some
strange.
kind of trauma was done to him. It sounds like
Exactly.
that's bizarre. He reported inability to communicate what he wanted to say, though he could understand it. Difficulty concentrating for more than 15 minutes at a time. He reported having an odd sense of self.
Read that. Hold on. Read it out loud.
Oh no!
Holmes just wanted his foreskin back, everybody. That's the
They
real.
stole
that's
it
the
from
real
him.
conspiracy. Oh my god. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Those rabbis, look at you. So he reported the odd sense of self and views himself as divided. This gets into the splitting, the multiple personalities. He said random, no apparent cause for back pain, throbbing, achy lower back, obsession to kill, hair pulling. So in this notebook, he writes about futility, the butterfly and ripple effect, how we're all one unit, like unity. And then he has several pages of him just writing why over and over again for 2 pages of just why. Very bizarre. And so it seems like he was trying to
practicing your
document
programming, right?
yeah, or like he's trying to figure out what's happening. Like, why is this happening to me? He's got these symptoms.
There's a fracturing of his mind happening in that moment, and he's attempting to make sense of it. In one personality, he's attempting to make sense of it. In the other, he's effectively kind of like reinforcing his programming, which is exactly what the journal of Sirhan and these various other Manchurian candidates kind of perfectly implement as well. This strange,
so creepy,
repetitive. Yeah. What did he say? He said when he was put into the hypnotic trance as far as it was by the prosecution and the defense, they both had expert hypnotists that put Sirhan in a trance, in a hypnotic trance, and they walked him through the alleged crimes that he was guilty of perpetrating allegedly. And so when they put him into the hypnotic trance, they say like Sirhan, they start to lead the witness in a strange way while he's already in the trance. You're essentially, they kind of, at least the prosecution, they said, okay, RFK just walked in and you want to kill RFK, right? And essentially he starts convulsing. Yeah, he starts convulsing and he starts pulling an imaginary trigger. And he's
Oh
like
my
legit,
God.
yeah, like he couldn't stop. And it was the same thing
Oh,
that was
that's
reported
crazy.
when he was tackled to the ground in the pantry of the Ambassador Hotel that night. It was the same thing that the authorities reported, that he frantically couldn't stop pulling an imaginary
Oh
trigger
my
even
God.
after the chamber was emptied. And just that alone is
That
like,
is
yeah,
it's
how on earth
insane.
can you read the journal of Sirhan? He says mind control, mind control, mind control, mind control. He just writes it over and over again.
Oh God, that is so creepy with like this why? And the journal itself is very schizophrenic because half of it is him trying to document like these weird things happening to him that he doesn't understand. And then the other parts are him talking about the theory of human capital and just killing people gets you points. And he doesn't even explain like how or like metaphysically what that even entails or means. And then he in their journal are plans, they're like blueprints for the theater, and so there's like this methodical mission stuff, and then there's this other side where he is talking about trying ways to avoid death and all this other things.
Oh my God.
Where he's like he
I
has to
wonder
do it in order to live.
exactly. So that's the first thought that I had was, okay, so he's attempting to circumvent the consequences and the consequential nature of his programming. And this
Yes.
would be the way that if you were like, okay, I'm not being affected overwhelmingly by all of these different factors playing out in my psychological framework in this current moment, by all the different deliberate factors involved as far as the implementation of how you would pursue this behavioral modification research. But if you're the individual being prioritized as the target, you're trying to figure out what is happening to you. And you're desperately, attempting to make sense of this and why it's the same thing that Tamerlane was trying to explain. Why am I waking up in these crazy positions and I have no idea how I got here? They're trying to make sense of what the hell they're actually pursuing in this hypnotic trance.
Right.
At least it feels like outside of their capability of physically controlling themselves.
That's
what it
exactly
feels
what
like.
that's exactly what this sounds like. He wrote in the notebook how after Fenton put him on certain medications, he lost the fear of consequences to his actions. So it lowered his inhibitions. He wrote in his notebook, this is one of the lines, no consequence, no fear, alone, isolated, no work for distractions, no reason to seek self-actualization, embrace hatred, a dark night rises.
Oh my God.
That
So they potentially attached the plot of the film in a way
into the journal that was mailed before the movie even came out.
Wow.
It's that weird. And he writes in his notebook, it's like he writes K/N. So it's a play on night and night.
Yeah.
Which is, bizarre. What
God.
else? So, he, as a child, he was taken for family therapy related to oppositional behaviors when he was just 8 years old that he claims he doesn't remember.
Are you kidding me?
Taken for therapy again when he was 14 years old due to
Where
his
did
parents'
you find
concerns.
that? I'm curious. Is it just in the court documents or where exactly did you find
So that is from the psychological evaluation. These are the
it's from the
doctor's
full
notes.
psych eval? Okay.
Yeah. And this is from a Dr. Metzer's evaluation. You'll find this information that as a child, like he doesn't remember this early childhood therapy and oppositional behaviors. Like, isn't that what it's like being a kid? So it's crazy.
Exactly.
So there's just that history there. But I wanted to talk about some of his behaviors preceding and after his arrest. So he had taken various pictures of himself on his phone. These are the famous pictures of him with the red hair. He's holding up like a bomb, making this weird face with the black contacts in. There's one of him holding his gun, and like they're very weird and sinister looking. It's very creepy, and it looks so different from
I thought they weren't real. at
Yeah,
first. When
right.
I went, yeah, when I went and
'Cause
found them,
they're
I was like,
so
"There's no way
creepy.
this is real, right?" They're superimposed with the eyes and shit. And then
Yeah.
I found out that no, that's not the case.
Well,
Yeah,
they were
that's
all taken on the same day. That should be noted. Like this was one day. It's not like this was a frequent thing he was doing. So that's also very bizarre that you just dye
yeah.
your hair, you put on these lenses and take these pictures. And he doesn't even know why he took them. He says, the decision to take these photos was precipitated by receiving black contact lenses. He initially stated he did not remember the reason for ordering the contact lenses, did not know the reason for taking the pictures. He
Dude.
later, it's like, oh, okay. He doesn't remember doing any of this stuff, but like it's happening. And
Right.
like the other guy that would wake up in places and not know where he was, it's the same thing happening to
Exactly.
these people. So
He's
he then,
arranging the mission,
yeah,
right?
exactly, without
While he's in
remembering.
his yeah, while he's in the hypnotic state,
Yep.
I would imagine, right? He
Yes.
would be participating in staging the mission. And then when he breaks
Yes.
free from it for a moment, he's like, "What the fuck am
the
I
heck?
doing?"
Exactly. Yes, correct.
Wow.
It's he then says, because of course they kind of prod him for more information. He says that he got these special effect lenses, the black lenses called possession lenses, as a way to differentiate myself from my normal self. He reported the appeal of the lenses was a feeling like I'm possessed. Just felt right, possessed in some manner, like I had to go through with it. He stated that the pictures included poses of him sticking his tongue out, holding a gun, wearing his body armor. He thought they would look good to whoever viewed them, but didn't know why.
No. According to Huggy Bear, Dahmer would wear yellow contacts as well. So that's kind of strange
Oh,
and interesting.
God. That's so
Especially
weird.
you consider how Dahmer connects to Detective James Rothstein. He was like a NYPD detective who was kind of put in charge of this sort of child abuse, child pornography investigative sort of. It was kind of like a group within the NYPD that had been effectively given the sort of allegedly at the time had been given the ability and the authority to pursue much of what would then be released in the New York State, or I believe it was the New York State Committee investigation on organized crime, something to that. I forget the name of the actual investigation that he was a part of at that very extraordinary level. But I will say that he connects a lot of this in terms of kind of like providing a window into what was Iran-Contra before Iran-Contra, as far as the playbook is concerned, and deliberately running these drug trafficking operations that in scope are far, it includes far more than just drug trafficking, arms smuggling, clearly human trafficking as well. And there are just like these sort of interesting operational objectives that are being implemented, and they very much cross over in many of these different criminal cases, and the Son of Sam, of course, being one of them, and how they were like smuggling heroin through medical supplies from from Taiwan, or from Thailand, and from Vietnam, and essentially using the Nugan Bank, which has all of these connections to the intelligence apparatus to sort of like like embezzle the money and various different things of that nature. But they have an old like Nazi tie as well. It's kind of like fundamentally financing right both sides of the war. But again, what do you see? You see Detective James Rothstein claimed that, okay, we were effectively pursuing throughout the course of the Son of Sam investigation this network, right, that seemed to uproot in upstate New York at the time and flee. Right, and sort of like escape to various different locations in the domestic U.S. And they sort of left this evidentiary trail of breadcrumbs, right, at a certain point. And they discovered, and Detective James Rothstein followed this. He called it like the Interstate 94 killings or something at the beginning. And then he followed it into Jeffrey Dahmer potentially meeting with the Pope and effectively being a member of what he claimed was the Hand of Death cult, which is the same cult that Henry Lee Lucas was allegedly a part of, right? Where he was being mind controlled and behavioral modification research implemented at the Ionia State Prison on Henry Lee Lucas before all of that took place. And he's another individual who blows the whistle, claiming that he was trained on how to commit child abductions, also targeted assassinations on a domestic black site in Louisiana, right? And that they were given prior knowledge for when there would be flyovers that would take place, and they could effectively hide the site. Yeah,
this is insane.
It is. Yep. It never ends.
It never ends. Exactly. My goodness.
We're like 3 hours and 8 minutes in, but I'm still down to keep talking. But if you want to wrap this up, then we can make a few additional points, and then we can kind of get on out of here if you want to.
Yes. Yeah, I've been up since 6 o'clock this morning.
I figured you were tired. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I am. It's okay. There's a lot of information here, though, that I think people need to hear if they haven't heard it. One interesting thing, and I think that I'm sure you heard this too, that you'll find bizarre. Holmes thought he was psychotic when he was at Denver Health Medical Center after his arrest, because he had an out-of-mind experience that involved looking down at his own treatment. He thought he might have been psychotic at the time of the shooting because, quote, looking back, I can see myself in the third person.
Oh my God.
You couldn't make it up if you wanted to.
Right.
He is described, this is from actual medical notes. They say that he appeared to demonstrate a genuine regret concerning the effect the event would have on his family, but is dissociative when asked about the impact of the families of the victims. So they're even writing like he's dissociating. He's
been preconditioned probably.
Yeah.
For whenever the conceptual outcome of the consequences actually takes root in your mind, you would have to have a trigger, at least a sort of defense mechanism in place to some extent, I would think. I don't know.
It's sad too, because when they first arrest him, and I have this clip in the beginning of my Holmes video, it's from the interrogation. He saw a sign about like children, and he asked them specifically if any children were hurt, because children are very innocent. Like, he was upset. He was told that a 6-year-old died, and he was upset.
Man,
so
I don't remember that for some reason.
sad.
That's crazy. Yeah.
It is
That
very
is terrible.
sad. It's sort of
Could
like,
you imagine if you woke up once and for all? You've been imprisoned, you've already been convicted, and you finally woke up from this sort of just like incomprehensible level of pharmaceutical abuse. Honestly, not only that, I mean, it's clearly more than that in terms of the programming itself, but as far as actually, if you weren't entirely just your mind is scrambled psychologically to an extent you could never come back from and return to sanity to a certain level. If that weren't the case, and if you one day woke up and you were already convicted and you were serving a sentence that you couldn't even fucking comprehend, that you were the sole perpetrator in committing something like this. So, and I don't believe he was the sole perpetrator, but you know what I'm saying. And you're told at this sort of detailed level what you were honestly the implication of what you have become responsible for in the darkest moment in your life, with no psychological reference to committing these heinous crimes, and then try and somehow put those pieces back together.
That has to be awful. I mean, I can't even imagine. No, it's, and there's a reason why he is kept in total isolation. He's not allowed any interviews with the media. He's not allowed to get married, not allowed to have any visits. And they do not forward mail to him, as far as I understand. Like, no one can get to him or talk to him. And I think it's for that specific reason, because, they have him drugged up, and they're concerned that he might remember something and start talking. And I will close by just giving you guys some idea of the state that he was in directly after his arrest. This was, remember, 2 years before his trial. So they had 2 years to dope him up. But this was how he presented. He began not eating, became paranoid. His food was being poisoned. He had to be moved to another cell. He got a lunch sack with a label SS, which he interpreted to be referring to the Gestapo. He subsequently required hospitalization due to an apparent delirium that he seemed to be suffering from. At that time, we also started him on antipsychotic medication, risperidone, antidepressant medication, Lexapro, and Congenitin. Like, they just like start putting him on all these meds. He made bizarre comments about how he was pulling away from people and drinking their blood. He did not remember then making such statements. He at one point was ramming his head toward the wall, headbutting it. He was noted to be talking to himself in jail, not sure if people were real or not. He was disorganized, appeared depressed, and said he was in a box without any juice and couldn't reach it. And then he was, talking, saying, they say his actions are increasingly bizarre. He has intermittently been refusing to wear clothing. He was noted to be licking the walls, defecating on the floor, smearing feces. Patient also noted to eat paper.
Oh my God. He's having a legitimate psychological break. Like, that's
this is literally, yeah.
His programming was, yeah.
Exactly, to self-destruct. And he was saying he had to do the event in order to not self-delete. So this behavior is weird. Banging his head so much and throwing himself backwards, he had to get a CT scan on his head because of an injury. He said at one point, "I took the blood that was not mine to take. It was unfair. It was selfish." Then they started giving him Haldol, intramuscular. He started repeating nonsensical phrases such as shadow point over and over. They say patient presents with psychotic catatonic features, has been engaging in bizarre behavior, has a disorganized thought process, perseverating on food and drink, appears to be responding to internal stimuli, and endorsed auditory hallucinations. Catatonic features include selective mutism, rigid posturing, echolalia. The etiology of psychological symptoms is unclear and requires further psychiatric evaluation. They had to put him in restraints because he would rip out the IVs of all the drugs they were trying to give him. And so that's just heartbreaking. It really is. It's so sad. He reports that he is in a shadow box with voices telling him to get water. He also reports about self-harm and that he bit his arm for food.
No way.
Yeah. And it goes on. I mean, this goes on and on for...
This is all in the psyche val.
This is all in, and read Dr. Metzer's is the one you want to read. And because he was definitely more honest. I think Reed was brought in to counter what Metzer said. Metzer found that the shooting was a direct result of Holmes' chronic psychotic illness, without which the crimes could not have occurred, and found that his appreciation of the wrongfulness of his actions was significantly impaired. And then they demanded a new evaluation and appointed Dr. Reed.
Right. So, that makes sense, man.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think Dr. Metzer knows about all of this stuff, but that was his way to describe like this guy is just totally out of it. And they still put him on trial. They still pumped him full of drugs. They had Dr. Reed come in and hit him with the NLP and had him, endorse this story that the official story of what happened, which again makes no sense.
No, not at all.
We can wrap it up there. I wanted people to understand, like,
Christina, you're killing it. Honestly,
what we read, and there's more. I encourage you guys to read Dr. Metzner's evaluation, Dr. Jeffrey Metzer. It is bizarre. It's even weird. That was just a fraction, okay, of like what was going on with this man that they still put on trial after all of that.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It's so crazy. And it didn't even say at one point there is no reason to live. And that was that he feels bored because there's nothing to do that is worthwhile and meaningful. And it was really just seemingly a part of his programming as well to sort of behave in this way throughout the trial and eagerly pursue what they hope to achieve, which is just kind of, eliminate this loose end, right? That's what it feels like, as far as I'm concerned. And you see the mind rapist, the therapist involved, and who else referred to their therapist in this very same way. I think maybe you mentioned it before. We talked about it privately, but it was Adam Lanza, the same exact playbook. I mean, he mentioned the mind rapist being his psychiatrist, and
his psychiatrist, we should add, was later arrested for what? Child
abuse. Yeah, exactly. Which goes to show Monarch mind control is alive and well, everyone. Don't fall for this misconception. There's a reason why. And you know what, that hit me so hard when you mentioned that the SS component to this strange Nazi reference that he had. It just perfectly embodies that of Monarch mind control, which was perfectly, implemented through Operation Paperclip. At least, like, that was what they claim, is that the more sinister, sadistic nature of the actual child abuse and trauma-based mind control, how you can achieve the dissociative identity disorder, the multiple personality disorder, and exploit those psychological conditions to your benefit. If you are the intelligence community, and not only does that create submissive soul, like in terms of like the Kinkora boys home, it was submissive boy soldiers they hope to create in that context. And just imagining, I've been mentioning these sort of Nazi breeding experiments that allegedly Lee Harvey Oswald and Carrie Lee Thornley, according to Carrie Thornley, they shared the same father biologically. And he actually replaced Hitler in 1945 or I forget which 1940. I can't remember which year it was, but he replaced Hitler for a brief moment in time after the fall. Right. And to me, it perfectly embodies, you put the side-by-side comparison of Oswald and his alleged father, and his father was in the SS. It makes sense. Why else would he be groomed into position as a strategic asset for some sort of ultimate goal of the killing of the king ritual in Dallas in 1963? It makes sense, But again, I know that's more of theoretical. I'm not attempting to claim that is like obviously been proven, and we have some sort of compelling evidence to that fact. But I will say it's too, again, when the puzzle piece fits too well, it's hard not to imagine, you know what I mean, that this is a potential reality. And I can't thank you enough for your time, honestly. And I have to say there's so much more I want to talk about, and that's just the nature I have a problem, but I think you do as well, and I appreciate it. And honestly, it's something that inspires me. So I can't thank you enough for even just being willing to have this conversation. But beyond that, it's the level of detail that you provide in terms of the research, like that inspires me as well. And so I can't thank you enough for what you bring to the table. I think you have beautiful intentions, and man, those are the people I want to surround myself with. So you being one of them. And again, it's like, I'm forever grateful. I couldn't thank you enough for you being willing and sharing your time with me and the audience and the information as well. But the only really last thing that I have to say before we come to a close and we kind of do our plugs is basically the Stephen Unruh story. At a very, briefly, I just wanted to mention it because it's fascinating what he claimed happened while he was actually in custody and among, right, as far as around James Holmes before he was effectively kind of removed from any sort of ability to engage with average people, right, to any level where they could potentially get word out in any detailed way. And this was all in the context of James Holmes claiming, as far as in reference to Stephen Unruh, that he was legitimately programmed to kill, which is just absolutely crazy that he mentioned those words. And if it is true, right, it fits perfectly as well. But and again, we're thinking about because again, this to me, we're talking about Project Monarch, right? This trauma-based mind control, these programming techniques that are just, again, it's something that it's very difficult to even conceptualize for yourself, but it's fascinating what he has to say. And so he claims, and this is all from the Daily Mail in 2012, basically is where I originally found a lot of this. And then I went and discovered more of the primary source documents of what he allegedly claimed. But the vast majority of his statement was pretty much only exposed through this sort of, avenue of information in terms of what was being provided to the public in the moment. And so I discovered this, and it was basically where you had Stephen Unruh saying that James Holmes told him he was programmed to kill during psychotherapy sessions, right? And he talks about how Holmes himself claimed of committing suicide during a 4-hour conversation with him. And so this article is published by the Denver Westward, and it goes into further detail from the original publication of the Daily Mail. And it talks about how essentially there was an effective dedication to really, like, as far as the framework of this article, they're attempting to discredit, right, Stephen Unruh. That's really the goal of the framework of the article itself. Yeah. So to me, I kind of took that and set it to the side and tried to discern for myself what was real, what was not, and if I was going to take this seriously. But that was the main goal: discredit inmate Stephen Unruh. And so he basically claims, and it's hilarious because they start out saying Stephen Unruh is having a hard time convincing anyone that he spent, this is how they start, that he spent hours talking to Aurora theater shooting suspect James Holmes shortly after his arrest last July. This is, of course, in 2012, this article ran. So you have authorities within the prison itself and the alleged area where he was being held. And these individuals within the county jail say there's no way that Unruh could have had that kind of access to be around James Holmes for that amount of time, except for the fact that certain elements of his story, including a description that resembles the headbanging routine that you mentioned before, right?
Yep.
That sent Holmes to the hospital.
He knew, yeah.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, we should add, Unruh reported this before those medical reports were ever publicly released. He would not have known that unless he was there.
There you go. So it's even more difficult to just at face value discredit these claims, honestly. At least I personally feel that way. And that was just really just attempting to discern for myself, like I mentioned before. But yeah, what does he say? He starts off by claiming they're going to try to discredit my story. That's the quote, right? That Stephen Unruh claimed, which is perfect. Exactly. It's just perfect. And so then he tells the Denver Westward that he says, quote, I was able to have a 4-hour talk with him. I talked him out of suicide. And then he says, to begin with, his account of what Holmes supposedly told him, obviously, is very bizarre. But at the same time, you see that clearly they try and discredit him by flaunting his criminal crime, as far as like the crimes he had been charged with, saying that he was serving 6 years for methamphetamine use and credit card fraud convictions. So therefore, don't believe the word that he says, right? Like that's basically it. And so he's asked about the bipolar condition that he was diagnosed with, right? And he claims it's always been meth for me, is how he starts by sort of explaining his own personal plight. He said, if I drink a beer or something, I've got the voices in my head that drive me to do more drugs. He's just an abuser. He's an addict. I mean, if anyone who's ever obviously, just abused a substance, or became somewhat controlled by the substance itself, or psychologically at least, or I would say physically it typically happens, but much more often I think there's a psychological impact as to the control mechanism involved with substance abuse. I don't believe that substance abuse makes you unable to make some sort of legitimate claim in terms of what you experienced while you were in custody, because especially then you're going to most likely be withdrawing from that very substance, or
Exactly.
yeah. So I highly doubt you're actually going to be consistently under the influence while you're in custody for that long, while you're having 4 days of conversations, or was it 4 hours? I can't remember now.
4 hours.
4 hours. Okay. But still, it's long enough, I guess. Well, maybe they're in a holding cell and they're still under the influence. It's possible, but still, what it sounds like is the county jail, could be the holding cells. Not quite certain. I believe that's what he claimed, actually, wasn't it? It was when they were in that area where you could actually still have sort of, close proximity, right, and access to various other prisoners. But anyway, to cut this off and keep it short, I just wanted to make sure that we got to kind of the crux of his statement, and that was that basically, and obviously, I think it's most important that you realize the fact that he claims at the beginning he could hear black guys yelling at James Holmes from the other side of the holding cells, right? "You're a piece of shit. Kill yourself," is what they were yelling to James Holmes, which I'm not entirely certain if that was happening, but I've been in the holding cells before at county jail, so I know how it is. They have that methamphetamine placard on the wall there, with at least in Benton County, with all the authorities there in the just the sort of booking area of the lockup, right? And you're sitting there. I'll never forget. I was in there for far too long, right, for some ridiculous low-level drug charge, and I have to sit there reading. And again, it was a learning experience. Many people have to take that more difficult path in order to come to terms with how you should engage in life itself. But anyway, yeah, I'll never forget that ridiculous methamphetamine placard where I'm reading the essentially the consequences of methamphetamine use over and over and over again before you're booked. But still, I could see where that would be possible. So he claims, Stephen Unruh, right, that essentially beyond the individual screaming at James Holmes to kill himself, he claims that obviously they would say, tell this dude he's not going to be all high and mighty on the prison yard as well. So there were all these threats being made toward. And so Unruh says he begins talking to Holmes, explaining how poorly child killers are received in prison. And then you had staff at the prison or the jail quickly covering the windows of James Holmes' cell door with a tarp. But Stephen Unruh continues the conversation and allegedly says he heard him pounding on the wall with his fists and then running, slamming his body and his head into the wall. Unruh described this action in an interview that took place just a few days later, as far as or before Holmes reportedly engaged in the headbanging that was then made public. So that was allegedly the timetable of kind of how it happened. I don't know. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way that I remember it and the way that it was described by Unruh himself. But then he goes on to claim that it went on for far longer than 10 minutes, as far as the alleged like slamming into the wall, to where he claimed himself he couldn't handle it anymore. Just hearing right the physical nature of what was being just taking place. And so then he says that he tells James Holmes, don't be doing that. You need to repent to the people for what happened. Right. And so then he asked James Holmes allegedly asked Unruh if he would form an apology letter for the children, which you mentioned before, where he was legitimately concerned about actually having affected any sort of child in terms of what took place. And so then you have a police captain, right? A county sheriff that essentially says, I believe his name is Vince Soder. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But he says that both the physical layout of the booking area and staff's monitoring of the area would have prevented this kind of dialogue that Stephen Unruh claims took place. So again, it's another sort of attempt at discrediting this story altogether. But the claim is, even if they were in booking at the same time, they couldn't shout from one cell to another like that. For someone to say they were communicating with this person, it can't happen. This is according to the law enforcement officials, of course, but they're allegedly directly supervising the booking operations and claiming that it would be virtually impossible. But Unruh insists that this sporadic conversation continued even after Holmes was moved to another cell in the area. And he says that James Holmes told him, quote, he felt like he was in a video game.
Yeah.
Right? This was during the shooting, he says this. And he says that he wasn't on his meds and nobody would help him. Now, I don't know about that. That seems very interesting that would have been claimed by him personally, unless he had counteracting medication that would have helped, with this sort of, prior programming. But he then says this, which is what I believe to be the most ridiculous red flag and smoking gun of the entire situation regarding Stephen Unruh, which is that James Holmes mentions NLP. He mentions neuro-linguistic programming specifically. And obviously, he also claims to have been, quote, programmed to kill by an evil therapist. Now, when he got out to his car, according to Stephen Unruh, he wasn't programmed anymore. It sounded kind of crazy to Unruh. He was trying to, he says that James Holmes was trying to sort of run it by him, basically, this sort of attempt to just see how he felt about this potentially being a fact. And then it turns out that Unruh, he had a phone number that he says James Holmes asked him to call. So the number connected to the cell phone of a bereavement counselor who says she has no acquaintance with Holmes or Unruh. Isn't that strange?
That is so weird. What's interesting about that claim, the video game part, is in the medical reports, he says that, and this was while he's in jail, he thought the week prior he was in a puzzle game that involved Peter Pan in a green vest. It's in the medical file, in Dr. Metzer's report.
Wow.
So that's just another weird element to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll finally
odyssey.
let you go, but I had to at least address it. I'm sorry for keeping you so long. It wasn't my intention. I even told her privately, everyone, I'll keep it under 2 hours, around 2 hours at most. That just never happened. I swear to God.
You can't do a full coverage of James Holmes in just 2 hours.
It's impossible. We still could have done
is.
We still could do another hour and a half, honestly, which is crazy, but at the very least. But anyway, I'll conclude with this, and then I'll let you do your plugs and we'll get on out of here. But that is just that, he's clearly serving life in prison at this very moment. I'm not entirely certain what all he was deliberately responsible for as an individual. I'm just not certain. I do not know. And knowing how many times it's occurred in the past in terms of the plausible patsy, I would be very skeptical and remain skeptical in terms of this criminal case, and just attempting to at any way come to some sort of certain conclusion. I think it's a difficult task, but I will say mind control was involved. Am I wrong about that?
Exactly. No, and I agree. In my video, I don't come to any conclusions either, other than the fact that you can't. How do you explain this rapid deterioration of Holmes in just a period of a couple months, where he's this high performing, promising student doing well, to all of a sudden he's failing his exams. He's dropping out at the same time that he's under this treatment from Dr. Fenton. And just seeing, comparing and contrasting, that video of him when he was at the Salk science camp, we're doing his presentation, and then how he presents in 2012, it's so drastically different that you have to know something happened to this man. We don't know the details of it all, but we can surmise from all of the circumstantial evidence that is available that it certainly wasn't good. And like you said, absolutely involves some kind of mind control. And I would end with the fact that, we don't know if he did anything. We don't know if he was just a patsy. We don't know if he was a participant with other people. We honestly have no idea, but he was a human being. He is a person. He means something to somebody. And so I always try to look at these cases with a level of compassion for these people, because I think that they're all victims. Adam Lanz, Eric Harris, Dylan Klebold, James Holmes, Sung Hee Cho, they're all victims of like the same type of program. And just the similarities between all of the different stories, there's so many synchronistic elements to it that you cannot look at it all and just dismiss it. I think that it honestly speaks for itself at this point. And that's sort of like what my Dark Knights series is about the sort of, it's a kind of like a reference to, it's an homage to PTK, but kind of with some of my own theories put in as well, and kind of building off of that. I did one on Anders Breivik, who also has very interesting connections, similarities. I think you'd find that one fascinating.
I covered that. It came up in the Order of the Solar Temple. The episode that I covered. Oh my God, I couldn't believe there was a connection. I was like,
so like what we're looking at here is this operationalized. This has gone worldwide. It's Gladio in Norway. It's Gladio here at home. And these networks are international. They're international networks that are carrying this out. And I call it like the covert government, which is the superstructure that exists beyond the idea of like individual nation states. That doesn't matter to these people at the top. They have, their own, whatever you want to call it, covert organization that is worldwide and has been operationally so for a long time. And I look at these people as victims of that. And I think it's very sad what has happened to them. So, I encourage people to do your own research, look into more of these cases, because we need it. There are there's no follow-up on any of this stuff. There's no pressure to do anything about it, and then we have to deal with these false narratives every time an event like this happens, where they're further cementing this idea of a lone wolf or whatever you want to call it in to scare people. And that has to be combated, because it is never true. In every scenario that they claim lone wolf, you will always find connections to law enforcement, to intelligence, to the military, or all of them, or psychiatry. There's always a psychiatrist. And so at this point, I think that we put together the pattern. And once that pattern is spotted, you see it over and over and over again. And that is concerning. So I will leave it at that. My channel is just Radix Verum, Radix Verum, as you see it there. You can watch I have those videos on a playlist called Dark Knights. Because that's how I view these people, is like they're trained in some way, they're programmed, they're trained to be these like dark figures, dark assassins, or patsies that are framed in that way. So that's why I called it that. And I have all kinds of weird videos beyond like this topic.
No, you do. And I love it so much. Again, it's you're lending credibility to what many people have chalked up to an overwhelming conspiracy that you shouldn't take, at any real, let's just say, in terms of the narrative, right? It seems like it's far more just easily set aside and sort of ignored. And I think that is because of it's due to the extraordinary allegations that are attached to many of these cases. And I think that's another thing that they've grown to understand, if not from the beginning, utilizing that as a sort of leverage, a tool of leverage, against our psychological framework and our ability to interpret, the deception playing out. But as you mentioned, this sort of like overarching umbrella term of the Gladio network that seems to very much, at least the playbook even, resurfacing so very often. But what you referred to it as international in scope, and I think you're so right. I mean, this is legitimately the kind of conclusion that I came to when I was doing the OTS episode. But it was kind of before that. It was just more reinforced in that moment, and that was basically, this is truly an international private intelligence network. It's strategically been designed by the very economic hitmen and sort of power brokers, right, that have seemingly kind of been placed into these strategic positions where they could at least abuse this prominent sense of power, right, that obviously is only accumulated to these certain layers of the compromised assets of the political puppet class. And that is why I see this just as far as the power brokers themselves, they're possessed with this sinister Malthusian ideology, right? And it very much plays into the transhumanist agenda and the modern eugenics, right, in every way, and just sort of the rebranded modern theory of eugenics. But again, it's just like, these are the true organizations that we need to prioritize as far as discerning between the true power brokers and just what inevitably becomes their political puppets, right? And I think that's the issue. And I'm so disgusted with people who, and again, it's not like I'm not trying to take shots. It's just like, personally, how can you not grow intellectually to an extent to where you realize that this is low-hanging fruit participating in this current system as it's currently structured, right? Like, it's designed for that reason. And I only wish that people would, and I believe this audience is very much equipped with this, but just more people would be willing to objectively pursue the truth and wake up to the underlying agendas at play here. And so I'll leave us with this, and then if you have any other plug, drop them and we'll get out. But that is basically that. There was a quote that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode by Lynn Hersha, who co-authored this book with her sister that was titled Secret Weapons: How Two Sisters Were Brainwashed to Kill for Their Country. And she wrote in this book, and it's a part of what I kind of like, I felt like I should strategically place this toward the end of my James Holmes episode, because I felt like it overall just kind of encompassed the emotional sentiment involved with losing your ability to exercise free will, right? And like, my God, and that is what she claimed was, what angers me is the loss of control. At any moment, someone could come to me, be dressed the right way, and use the right code, and I no longer have free will. I will do anything that person requests. I hate them for that. Nothing else is as bad as knowing that I'm always out of control, knowing that I am still a laboratory experiment, a puppet whose strings are hidden from everyone but my handlers, and I don't yet know how to break free. And so I think throughout the course of this episode, we've been left with the unavoidable question, right? And this is, I was very proud of this whenever I closed and concluded my episode, because it felt like it was exactly what you should imagine in this theoretical dystopian universe that we now sort of face, right? In terms of just the world around us, what is strategically possible to effectively achieve in the mind of the average human, unbeknownst to them. And that is, we find ourselves yet again gazing into the abyss, right? And that is just another thing that, like, when I went on NDS most recently, we discussed a little bit of that specifically, gazing into the abyss and the abyss gazing back. and how much it has an emotional effect. There's a toll that ultimately is taken upon upon not only your psychological ability to engage with these ideas and these disturbing details, but there's an emotional toll on, I believe, I mentioned this in the Franklin scandal or the Finder's Code, I can't remember which, but you never resurface whole. I feel like you lose a part of yourself in a way. And I know that sounds, it sounds like, again, almost dangerous, and it is to a certain extent. And I'll never forget, I mentioned this many times, but 8mm, right? The film with Nicolas Cage talking about child abuse and snuff films. Joaquin Phoenix's character explains to him before he enters a room where he's going to screen a very disturbing, child abuse a video that he will never return from, in terms of the psychological implications, the impact emotionally it will have on you. And he tells him, you dance with the devil doesn't change, the devil changes you. And he says that to him before he enters that room and screens that film. And I'll never forget that, because that's how I feel when I resurface from digging into these more disturbing details, as I've mentioned, in terms of these child abuse networks. And again, I always feel like I don't have the right to turn a blind eye, because I've lived such a privileged life. But man, I feel like it should be the overall ultimate, just conscious goal of each of us to shine a light into that darkness and attempt to uphold the victims who have no real protectors in place. And that's my main goal. But I just wanted to leave us with this imaginary world, right? A theoretical world, which I believe to exist. And that is a world filled with covert methods of hypnosis, dissociative identity disorder, drug and question. Could James Holmes be the product of a modernized form of MK Ultra? I just think the answer is yes. But yes. Right. Anyway, I love
That's
you,
such a great way.
That
was such a great way to end it. Yes, I think that perfectly kind of summarizes where we've gone, the past several hours covering this story.
Yes.
Very sad, but also I think exposing it takes away the power that the next event has. Yes. The more that it is exposed, the less powerful their magic is.
You're absolutely right. I think it's the only way, right? The only way forward. You force them to pivot. You force them to improvise a little more often. You make sure that at least they have to address the fact we're on to the playbook. We get it. The pattern recognition is starting to register. And that alone will, at the very least, force them to kind of change direction. And let's hope that can save some of us. I don't know, at the very least, right? Isn't that the goal? But anyway, again, I have to say, nothing but love for you, Christina. I can't thank you enough for coming on, and I hope I didn't scare you away from ever agreeing to do this again. Honestly, I feel
not
terrible.
At all.
Okay.
No, I'll have to come back next time after I get Sung Heat Show out.
Awesome.
Virginia Tech.
I would love that. I love it. All right. Do you have any other plugs?
Nope, that's it.
Okay,
Just
awesome.
Look forward to the Sung video coming out next. I'm sure I'll put out smaller videos in between, but that'll be the next part of the Dark Knight series. So I hope you guys look forward to that, because that's another one that is kind of underreported on, undercovered, even amongst circles like these where we kind of talk about these topics. That's kind of the one that was a big event too. I mean, Virginia Tech had 33 casualties, including Cho himself.
Whoa. What was that?
Yeah, exactly.
What number was that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Man, thank you, Christina. Honestly, I can't thank you enough. I keep saying it, but I'm looking forward to the next time we get the chance to collaborate, honestly, because again, anytime I just came off of the episode with JJ Vance on Operation GCD. Man, he's a wealth of knowledge. If you ever get the chance to talk with him, I learned a lot from him as well. Just as much, it feels like very similar as far as the experience. So I just have to say again, that is why I'm here. Like the constructive nature of this conversation, and so you are extraordinarily valuable to this community, and I hope you can continue down the path that you're on, because I do believe what you're doing is so important ethically in these times we find ourselves in, right? These very strange times. I mean, talk about a level of sinister darkness as far as ethical values. And so I have to say, I view you as having beautiful intentions and a wonderful heart in the right place. So thank you again. And yeah, I will definitely be hitting you up in the near future. But as far as everybody else, you guys know, nothing but love, man. I love the chat. I'm glad you guys showed up tonight. I can't thank you enough either. And going forward, man, I hope to do a little bit more of the interviews, at least maybe one a week. I don't know. I'm going to try, but I'm trying to balance too much, honestly, but we're going to figure it out. But if you at all have the ability to support me and you're interested in anything I've ever said resonates with you, obviously the best place is the Patreon, which patreon.com/theunderclass podcast. You can find the paywalled show there at even the lowest level tier. So thank you all. I love you. And we'll definitely, awesome, dude. Glad you found me through that. Nice to see you here, your favorite uncle. But yeah, apologize again for the duration of time, but thank you, Christina, for being willing. I know you're tired, so go get some sleep. And everybody else, have a good night. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for everything.